The hearing will please come to order. Before proceeding, I would like to submit for the record, at the request of the former Vice Chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, a statement of that committee dated April 26, 1984, and pages 8 and 9 of the committee report of that Intelligence Committee relating to the mining of a Nicaraguan harbor and assorted inserts. Without objection, it will be made part of the record. This morning we have a new witness who comes from Central America, Mr. Adolfo Calero. Mr. Colero, will you please stand? Will you raise your hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Please be seated. Mr. Paul Barbadoro will proceed with the questioning.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the witness has an opening statement which he'd like to read.
Thank you. I learned during my education in this country the value of democracy.
Mr. Colero, yes, thank you.
I learned during my education in this country the value of democracy. Upon graduation from the University of Notre Dame in 1953, I returned to Nicaragua to a dictatorship in which the freedoms which I saw in the United States were denied. I became, as a result of my exposure to this country, a knight in democratic armor in my own country, imbued by my experience here in the ideals of representative government and free enterprise. I had made mine Jefferson's oath, quote, I have sworn before the altar of God hostility against any form of tyranny over man's mind, end of quote. And that became my golden rule in opposing the Somoza dictatorship. When Somoza was driven from our country, we had a right to expect that our dreams of democracy would be fulfilled. Instead, we got the Soviet totalitarian regime, an oppressive dictatorship operated by the Soviet Union and its proxy, Cuba. In January of 1983, I chose to abandon the comforts brought by 30 years of successful hard work rather than subordinate principle and dignity to the vanguard of the proletariat. As Benjamin Franklin put it, resistance to tyrants is obedience to God. 4 years and many trying experiences later, I come before you ever intent on liberating Nicaragua from Soviet territorial imperialism and to restore freedom to my land. Unfortunately, all too often, the West drifts in a sea of contradiction and indecision and watches helplessly when subjugated peoples rise against communist totalitarianism, thus consigning people who yearn for freedom and self-determination to communist domination. An old Spanish fable relates how two rabbits were running desperately from two dogs in hot pursuit. As the dogs were closing in, the rabbits would stop and discuss whether the villains were beagles or bloodhounds. Of course, they never reached an agreement nor come to a solution. We will never know which rabbit was right, but Iriarte, the fabulist, tells us that the ferocious dogs never argued, never doubted, never swayed, caught up with their prey and devoured it. From President Monroe to President Reagan, for the sake of security or for that of freedom, we have read and heard many heartening statements. Here is a token from President Truman. Quote, it must be the policy of the United States to support free people who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by outside pressure. In dire straits, we Nicaraguans desperately need for such words to come to life. Even though it is we who are and will keep on doing the fighting and the dying, what is really on the scale is American resolve to stand by its friends, its principles, and its policies. As has been stated, quote, when the Soviet Union advances by using proxy troops, its conquests are still Soviet victories and Western defeats, end of quote. Let us not be fooled. Before friend and foe, it is the United States that will win or lose in Nicaragua. The United States evokes in Nicaraguans a mixture of admiration and perplexity. At times, we feel you are distant neighbors, yet your generosity and magnanimity often make us believe that we are close friends. The fact is that proximity and shared values have given us a common destiny that we Nicaraguans are now fighting for. By helping us, you defend your own future. As of last week, all opposition forces to the Sandinista regime have united and formed the broad-based and amply representative Nicaraguan resistance, a 54-member assembly, just one short of the Constitutional Convention of Philadelphia in 1787, elected a 6-man directorate and will proceed to draw up a program of democratic government based on free election, a system of checks and balances that divides powers and restrains rulers, guarantees all freedoms, promotes the observance of human and civil rights, as well as social justice, religious and economic freedom, and private property. Notwithstanding our decision to fight for our freedom, we are ready to make peace, understanding that the state of human dignity, sovereignty, and harmony can be achieved only through a government which has the consent of the governed. Besides our own initiatives, we have welcomed negotiated settlements sponsored by Congressman Jim Slattery of Missouri and President Oscar Arias of Costa Rica, among others. We are ready to explore and follow through on such initiatives. Millions of words have been written, spoken, and televised on Nicaragua. Images, many of them false, have been created. Half-truths and outright falsehoods, propelled by the masters of deceit, have found their way to public opinion and official circles the world over. As Will Rogers, the famous American humorist and actor who visited Nicaragua after the 1931 earthquake said, quote, "The trouble ain't that people are uninformed, it's that they know so much that just ain't so," end of quote. Need I wonder who is responsible for that? Unfortunately, there is no time for details, but it has been proven to the point of satiety that the Sandinistas have denied all freedoms, including religious freedom, destroyed institutions, sponsored terrorism, established a Soviet base in mainland America, brought on economic and political chaos to Nicaragua, and are in the process of destabilizing the 4 Central American democracies. The Sandinistas have drawn a barrier on progress and set a whole region in reverse, back to epochs that had been bravely surpassed. In addition to the sea of troubles brought on Nicaragua by the Sandinistas, we have been unfortunately dragged into an internal inquisition involving opposing views, technicalities, and fine points of laws or amendments that we do not fully comprehend, and apparently neither does world opinion. Yes, we receive funds from foreign sources, That was the only way to survive after the U.S. aid was cut off by Congress. We gratefully welcomed the support of patriotic Americans and citizens of other countries who understood our plight and the serious implications of our defeat. But we bore the brunt of fighting for our freedom. We never asked for intervention by American military forces. This has been our battle, and not Vietnam. We are making history, but also repeating it. In 1775, front companies were set up in Europe to receive funds contributed by France and Spain. It all developed into a delicate international problem, but it served a worthy cause, that of the American revolutionaries fighting to free this country from the British Empire. God bless all of the Americas. Thank you.
Mr. Colero, I thank you very much for your eloquent statement. Mr. Barbadoro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colero, good morning. I'd like to begin by asking you some questions about your background. You are a citizen of Nicaragua,
Yes, sir.
and you lived in Nicaragua until December of 1982.
Yes.
You hold an undergraduate degree from Notre Dame
Yes.
and a law degree from the University of Central America.
Yes.
You were a businessman in Nicaragua, were you not?
Yes.
Could you tell us what you did?
Well, I started out working for W.R. Grace, then went on to become general manager of the Coca-Cola bottling company in Nicaragua. And during this time, I taught accounting at the Jesuit University. I became dean of the graduate school. I was a volunteer fireman for 17 years. I was in politics, fighting the Somoza dictatorship, and I was director of various business enterprises, and also a director of the Chamber of Industry, Chamber of Commerce. I was president of the Hotel Association. Well, and
You were involved in a number of businesses
yes,
in Nicaragua.
yes, sir.
You were also an opponent of the regime of President Somoza, correct?
Yes, sir.
In fact, you were jailed by the regime because of your opposition on more than one occasion.
Yes, sir.
Were you also an opponent of the Sandinistas when they came to power?
What was I also?
Were you also an opponent of the Sandinistas when they came to power?
Yes, because I knew them for what they were.
In December of 1982, you left Nicaragua and shortly thereafter joined the FDN, correct?
Yes, sir.
And shortly after joining the FDN, you became the president of the FDN.
Yes, about 7 months later, I was elected president by my fellow directors.
Does the FDN have both political and military components?
Yes, at the time we called ourselves a political military organization, pluralistic and intent on liberating our country from communist domination.
Was there an FDN leader whose principal responsibility was military affairs?
Yes, that's
Enrique Bermudez?
Comandante Bermudez, yes.
And your responsibilities were primarily political affairs, is that right?
Yes, sir.
When you joined the FDN in 1983, what was the size of the FDN fighting force?
Maybe upwards of 2,000.
And what happened to the size of that force between 1983 and 1986?
Well, it grew under a ceiling set by this government, and by June of 1984...
The ceiling you're referring to is a ceiling set by the United States government,
yes,
is that
sir,
right?
by this government, yeah. And by June 1984, it might have amounted to about 6,000 or so. And then then there came the cutoff of funds, because there were no more funds appropriated.
And again, these are the cutoff of United States government funds in the
Yes.
summer of '84, correct?
Yes, sir, yes. In June it came really, because there were no more funds. And from July of 1984 to the following year, we more than doubled our forces to about over 17,000 men. And then we dropped down a bit towards the end of 85 and during 1986. And by the end of 1986, we probably had about 16,000 men.
So is it fair to say that there was a dramatic increase in the number of FDN soldiers after the U.S. government money ran out in the summer of '84?
Yes, because we had no ceiling except an economic ceiling.
The FDN fights primarily in northern and central Nicaragua, correct?
Yes, sir.
Are there other factions of Contras operating independently of FDN?
Yes, sir.
There are Indian groups fighting in Nicaragua, are there not?
Indian and Creoles, that is Indians and blacks who are called Creoles in Nicaragua, in the north and in the east, and the ARDE faction, which is called the Southern Front in the deep south.
There is a faction operating independently of the FDN in southern Nicaragua known as the Southern Front, and that's what
Yes.
you just referred to, right?
Yes, sir.
What was the size of the Southern Front forces in 1983 when you joined the FDN?
Well, at the height, I understand it was about 4,000.
And what happened to the size of those forces between 1983 and 1986?
They went down, sort of diluted, separated.
Is it fair to say that at the same time that the FDN forces were increasing, the Southern Front forces were decreasing in size?
Yes,
And the funding for the Southern Front was largely independent of the funding for the FDN, is that right?
well, the Southern Front was funded by the United States government, as was the Northern Front and the Indians and Creoles, up to June 1984.
But the funding for the Southern Front didn't go through the FDN to the Southern Front forces, correct?
Not from the United States government, no.
From shortly after the time you joined the FDN in 1983 until the summer of 1984, the FDN was funded by the United States government through the CIA, correct?
Yes, sir.
And during that time, the CIA provided your arms and ammunition for you?
Yes.
Did you buy any arms and ammunition on your own during that period?
No.
At that time, the CIA also gave you food for your troops, clothing and medicine for your troops, is that right?
Yes, well, some of those things would be purchased by us, you know, like food and medicine.
With money that the CIA gave you?
Yes.
You have mentioned that in the summer of 1984 that the CIA money ran out. When did you learn that that money was going to run out?
Well, May, more or less May, April. Well, we were always under the threat, let's say, of it running out. And May, it was clear that it would run out.
When you realized that the money was going to run out, what effort did you make to raise money on your own?
Well, we started talking to people, visiting people in foreign countries and friends in foreign countries.
Did you make attempts to raise money from foreign governments on your own, Mr. Calero?
Well, yes, from sectors. I should be specific, from sectors of foreign governments.
Were you successful in your attempts to raise money on your own?
Well, not money, but some materials.
So you obtained some equipment, some material support, but you did not obtain any money, is that right?
Right.
When did you meet Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North?
My recollection is that I met him in Honduras in a meeting that took place maybe in May, June 1984.
Colonel North's appointment books reflect a meeting between you and Colonel North in April of 1984. Do you remember that meeting?
I've been asked about it before. I do not remember it, and but as I said, my recollection is meeting him in May, June of 1984.
The meeting that you can recall, where was that?
In Central America.
Who else attended that meeting?
Well, besides officers of the Central Intelligence Agency, it was Colonel North and some of our directors.
What was the purpose of that meeting?
I have described it as a pep talk. No, things are looking bad and everything, but we will keep on trying. The president will keep on pressing. We'll keep on soliciting funds, and sort of a consolation pep talk situation.
They told you that the president wasn't going to give up on the Contras. He was going to keep fighting for support for
Well,
you. Is that
yes,
right?
and the president would say it himself, yes.
Did anyone at that meeting suggest to you that they might be able to raise funds for you from private or foreign government sources?
Not to my recollection that anybody committed himself to do that. But as I say, it was a pep talk. It was something that gave us hope.
You saw Colonel North again that summer, did you not?
Oh, yes, yes.
What happened at your next meeting with Colonel North?
Well, we went into a lot of detail of the situation, I would say, and he was also very encouraging. I saw in him a very dedicated man, and I identify him as my liaison with the United States government.
Well, Mr. Calero, did Colonel North suggest to you at the second meeting that he might be able to raise some funds from foreign sources for you?
Well, he didn't say he personally would, but I was led to believe that there were people working on something, that something was going to happen.
When you say you were led to believe by Colonel North that
Yes.
somebody was working on raising money for you, is that right?
Yes, I would say so.
And as a result of that conversation, Colonel North asked you for the number for your bank account, correct?
Yes, Colonel North, I gave Colonel North and others a bank account number.
Let's stick with Colonel North for a minute. That would have been some point in the summer of 1984, prior to July of 84?
Yes.
You say you also gave your bank account number to other people. Who else did you give the number to?
Well, General Singlaub and General Secord and a few others that I wouldn't remember now.
Let me ask you about General Secord. How did you meet General Secord?
I don't remember if I called him or if he called me, and then we met at the hotel, but I would say that it was through the indication of Colonel North.
It was Colonel North that arranged the meeting one way or another, is that right?
Yes.
And did General Secord ever suggest to you that he might be able to play a role in raising some money for you from foreign sources?
Yes, sir, he did.
What did he tell you?
Well, I don't remember. We had different meetings, but in one of these meetings, he suggested that he had friends in the East and that Middle East, and that he would approach them, and then at one point he said that, he might be able to get between 15 and 25 million dollars, and that he would visit with these friends, and then he confirmed that he had visited with a sheikh or a prince or...
So you had a conversation with him in which he suggested he might be able to raise between 15 and 25 million from sources that he was familiar with in the Middle East, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And at some point, he told you that he had played a role in receiving some of the money in obtaining some of the money that you had received, is that right?
Well, yes, I understood that he had, he said that he had visited with these people, that he had made the solicitation, and apparently took credit for helping out.
And when was that he appeared to take credit for helping you in raising money?
I would not, during the course of our receiving this money.
Would it have been after February and March of 1985 when you'd received $24 million?
Well, yes, that is correct, yes.
Let's go back to the summer of 1984. You received your first substantial deposit in July of 1984, correct?
Yes, $1 million.
Before you received that $1 million, did Colonel North or anyone else tell you that it was going to be arriving?
No, I was never told when or how much would be arriving.
Did you tell Colonel North that you had received $1 million?
Yes, I did.
Did he tell you where the million had come from?
No, he didn't.
Did you ask him?
No, I didn't care where it come from.
You were happy to get the money and you didn't care where it had come from, is that right?
Yes. I had other, much more important worries than to find out where it had come from.
Did Colonel North tell you that you could be expecting more money deposited in the future?
Well, I remember that every time we got money, I mean, we were very happily surprised or something. So I don't think that anybody told me that there will be something coming. As a matter of fact, I could not plan for arms purchases because we didn't know, and we made our first arms purchases after we had received an amount, and it was until the third receipt that we figured, well, this might be something that will be followed up. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned additional deposits. After July, you continued to receive deposits of $1 million a month, did you not?
Yes, sir.
And did you continue to keep Colonel North informed when you would receive deposits?
Yes, yes.
You continued to receive those deposits until February of 1985, correct?
Yes.
What happened in February of 1985?
Then we received two substantial deposits, I believe, of $7.5 million or $5 million, and then in March we got $7.5 million. The thing is that we got $8 million, and then between February and March we got 24.
Mr. Calero, could you look at Exhibit AC2, which is a listing of deposits to your account by source and by date that was drawn from bank account records that you provided us. Does that refresh your memory about what deposits you received in February and March?
Yes, yes.
And could you please just tell us what those deposits were?
$1 million between July '84 and February '84. In February '84,
85, isn't it?
85, excuse me, we received $5 million and $4 million, and in March of '85 we received two deposits of $7.5 million each.
So between July of 1984 and March of 1985, how much did you receive in total from this source?
$32 million.
After March, did you get any additional money from this source?
No, we did not.
When the deposits increased dramatically in February, did Colonel North give you any prior warning that the deposits might be increasing?
No, but he was happy when I told him that I had received them.
And even then, he didn't tell you anything about where the money was coming from?
No.
In addition to the $32 million you received from this source, you received $1,045,000 from a company known as Intel Cooperation, Inc., correct?
Yes.
When did you receive that first deposit?
In November of 1985.
And is it fair to say that those contributions continued on a sporadic basis until January of 1987?
Yes, that is correct.
Intel Cooperation is a company with which Richard Miller is associated, correct?
Yes.
How did you come to receive these contributions from Intel Cooperation, Inc.?
Through my participating in in addressing groups of potential donors.
And who arranged those meetings where you addressed potential donors?
A man by the name of Channel.
That's Carl Spitz Channel?
Carl Spitz Channel, yes.
How did you meet Mr. Channel?
I do not remember the circumstances, but it was after his participation in what was called the Nicaraguan Refugee Fund dinner, and he offered to help in raising funds.
And did Colonel North introduce you to Mr. Channel?
No, no.
Did you know that Mr. Channel was also in frequent contact with Colonel North?
That became apparent after. I would not remember when, but that became apparent after.
How did the money that was raised through your speaking engagements arranged by Mr. Channel end up going through Intel Cooperation, Inc.? Do you know?
Well, that is an arrangement between them, which I didn't know anything about. I had known Miller before I knew Channel, and I don't know what brought them together or what kind of an arrangement they had. It was none of my business.
Did Miller tell you, though, that he would be helping to channel these funds down to you?
Yes, yes, yes. I would tell him about our needs.
Did you ever discuss specific needs, such as what kind of arms and what kinds of ammunition you would need with either Mr. Miller or Mr. Channel?
Well, I used to tell the newspaper people what weapons we were using, what weapons we needed. I used to tell everyone. I mean, that was part of my getting people to know of our necessities and what we were using, our shortcomings and whatever.
Did you ever give either Mr. Miller or Mr. Channel a list of arms and ammunition that you needed?
I do not recall, but it could have been possible because I had that in my briefcase all the time. It was a very short list. I mean, we use very, very few weapons.
You also received $200,000 from Lake Resources, correct?
Yes, yes.
And that was in October of 1985 that you received that $200,000?
Yes, yes, sir.
Did you know at the time that the money was coming from Lake Resources?
No, I found that out in February of 1987 when my lawyer told me when Lake Resources became known, then my lawyer spotted the... See, I had not seen the bank statements before.
Did Colonel North tell you that he was sending you some money at around that time?
No. No.
Did you know that you had received $200,000 in October of 1985?
Yes, but I don't know where from.
Again, you were surprised and happy to get this money?
No, I wasn't surprised because I connected this money with channels.
So you assume that the $200,000 had been raised by Channel and Miller for you, is that right?
Yes, yes.
Have we now described all of the contributions you received during that period from 1984 until 1986?
Yes, yes. All the money contributions that were in our bank, and we had a lot of material goods that were given to us, medicines and uniforms and shoes and that.
Now, between July of 1984 and 1986, when the U.S. government funding resumed, you spent approximately $19 million for arms and ammunition, correct?
Correct, sir.
Prior to July of 1984, had you had any experience in purchasing weapons?
No, sir.
How did you determine what arms to buy and how much to pay for them?
Well, I knew what was being used, and we had prepared before with the CIA a budget which listed all the materials that we were going to buy with the new funding, which never came. But so I knew what we had to get, and I consulted it with our military men.
Did you also consult with Colonel North?
Oh, I told him, I used to tell Colonel North practically everything, that I had no reservation. I had full confidence and trust in him.
So you discussed your purchases with Colonel North in advance, is that right?
I discussed our needs and probably told him that I was going to purchase, yes.
Did you also tell him after you made a purchase what you had purchased and how much you had paid and who you had bought it from?
Yes, yes.
Mr. Calero, could you please turn to Exhibit AC3, which is a memorandum from Colonel North to Robert McFarland, dated April 11, 1985, and turn to the back of that exhibit to a chart that's headed FDN Expenditures and Outlays. Have you seen that chart before?
Yes.
That chart contains a listing of arms and ammunition and some of the purchase prices that were paid, correct?
Yes.
Did you give Colonel North the information that was used to prepare this chart?
Yes.
From whom did you buy your first weapons?
From Gretsch World.
And when did you buy those weapons?
Fall of 1984.
And how did you come to buy from Gretsch World?
Well, I knew a retired U.S. colonel by the name of McCoy, whom I had met in Nicaragua back in 1981, back in 1978, 77, 78, 79. And through him, he approached me and said he could be of service. And when I needed him, I called him.
And did Colonel McCoy suggest that he could get weapons for you?
Yes.
Colonel McCoy is associated with Gretsch World, is that right?
Yes.
And a man named Ronald Martin is also associated with
Yes,
that
his card read R&M Equipment Company. Colonel McCoy's calling card read that way, yes.
Take a look at Exhibit AC3. Are the weapons that you bought from Gretsch World and R&M Supply listed under the heading Independent Acquisition on this chart?
Yes.
How much did you pay for those weapons?
About $2 million, a little over $2 million, yes.
The phrase independent acquisition on this chart, is that your phrase or is that Colonel North's?
No, I do not remember labeling independent.
The remaining arms listed on this chart were all purchased from General Secord, correct?
The remaining, yes, yes.
Do you know why Colonel North decided to characterize the arms from Gretsch World as independent acquisition and not to characterize the arms purchased from General Secord that way?
No, sir.
When did you buy your first weapons from General Secord? Would it have been sometime in the fall of 1984?
Maybe, yes, maybe August, September.
And is your first purchase,
I ordered in August, September. Yes.
you ordered the weapons and they didn't arrive until 1985, is
Yes,
that right?
Yes.
And the first purchase that you made from General Secord is listed on this chart as Sealift number 1, correct?
Yes.
When did Sealift number 1 arrive in Central America?
That's the one we call the slow boat from China. That one arrived in April.
It was delayed in arriving, correct?
Yeah, in April, yes.
And what did you do because this Sealift was delayed in arriving?
Well, we were having a very, very difficult situation. And in December, I called on General Secord and asked him if he could get us emergency supplies, and he said yes. So this, what's called the Airlift number 1, the Airlift number 2 were planned.
So these first two airlifts that arrived in February and March in 1985 were emergency supplies that you needed because the Sealift was delayed in arriving, is that right?
Yes, sir.
In addition to the purchases from General Secord that you just described, you also purchased a second boatload of weapons from him, is that right?
Yes, sir. That was the big purchase, and this one was planned when we got the big money.
And in total, you spent approximately $11 million in purchases that you made from General Secord, is that right?
Yes, just about.
How did you come to purchase arms from General Secord?
Well, from his offering to help us out in that regard, I was very much, I was very wary of just dealing with anyone, and so I was happy to deal with a United States retired general.
Did you approach General Secord or did he approach you?
No, he told me that he would help me out in that. Or I asked him. It's very difficult to establish.
Did General Secord tell you when you were buying these arms from him that his company was going to charge between 20 and 30% markup on the weapons?
No, sir.
In fact, he led you to believe that he was selling you these weapons for cost, correct?
That was my understanding, my impression.
Were you surprised to learn that General Secord testified a couple of weeks ago that he was charging a 20 to 30% markup on the weapons?
Well, it was a revelation.
You also purchased some arms through General Singlob, correct?
Yes.
Those arms are not reflected on this chart, is that right?
No, sir, because that, well, it was done after.
Could you turn to Exhibit AC4? Have you seen that document before?
Yes, and I can see my initials on it.
Mr. Calero, we obtained this document from Barbara Studley, an associate of General Singlob's. Could you tell us what it is?
Well, no, I understand that she's not an associate, but a friend of General Singlob, and friend of mine too, and a real, for our cause, you know, a big booster of our cause. This is a list of what we acquired from Eastern Europe.
So these are the arms that you bought through General Singlob, is that right?
Yes.
When did these arms arrive in Central America?
They must have arrived in July, I believe.
July of 1985?
1985, yes.
After this shipment in July of 1985, did the FDN buy any more arms?
No, we did not buy any more arms.
What happened to all these arms and ammunition that you purchased between the fall of 1984 and July of 1985?
Well, they were stock as given out to our men as needed, and to this day we're fighting with the rifles that we obtained in this shipment, 10,000, and we still have a few million rounds of the ammunition left.
You've testified to approximately $19 million worth of arms purchases.
Yes.
We know you raised more than $32 million in contributions. Could you tell us what you spent the rest of the money on?
Yes, the rest of the money was, the rest of the money was spent for uniforms, gear, web gear, boots, food, medicine, administrative, travel, family support of our organization for 13 months, and I made an average the other day. It comes to $52 per man, per fighting man, per month for a period of 13 months.
Mr. Calero, the records that you provided to the committee of your bank accounts show that you converted approximately $3 million of this money into traveler's checks.
Yes.
Why did you do that, and can you tell us what you used that money for?
Traveler checks are a very handy way for people who are continually traveling, and we converted that into traveler checks in order to be used for many expenses that we had and to give to our for family support. And also, at the beginning, we did not have the transfer connection, let's say. The money transfer connection had not been established.
That is the ability to get money from your bank accounts down to Central America, is that right?
Yes, yes, by wire transfers and that. So for the first months, we used to, all our expenses in the region, everything, food for the troops and everything, were also taken care of out of travel checks, yes.
Your records also show payments of approximately $1.8 million to a person named Achilles Marin.
That was not a payment.
What was that used for?
That was not a payment. That was, Achilles Marin is a money broker, and we would deposit in his account in the States, and he would deliver local currency in the region.
So you would deposit dollars into his account, he would convert them into lempiras and deliver them to the FDN forces, is that right?
Into local currencies.
Okay. And is that also the case for the 1.8 million that went to Eric Lacayo?
To Lacayo, yes. Sort of a Dick Pereira
Mr. Colero, other than the money you received from Lake Resources and Intel Cooperation, Inc., is it fair to say that all of the money other than that you received prior to July of 1985?
I did not get the question.
I'm sorry, let me phrase it differently. The $32 million that you received from the foreign government,
Yes.
you received that money prior to July of 1985, correct?
Yes, yes,
And you've already testified that you bought no arms after July of 1985, is that right?
right.
General Secord testified a couple of weeks ago to a meeting that he had with you in July of 1985. Do you remember that meeting?
I've met with General Secord many times.
Do you remember a meeting in Miami with Colonel North and General Secord and Enrique Bermudez?
Yes.
And that was in the summer of 1985?
Yes, sir. I heard about that testimony, yes.
What was the purpose of that meeting?
Well, it was just another meeting, and I do not recall exactly what came about, but we must have discussed the resupply situation and the general aspects of what was going on, our future needs for weapons and ammunition. And
General Secord testified that the inadequacy of the FDN airlift air support operation was a subject that was discussed at that meeting. Do you recall that being discussed?
it could have been, yes, because we only had DC-3 and we had many difficulties in supplying our troops by air.
General Secord also recalls discussions about the need to build up the Southern Front fighting force. Do you remember that being discussed?
But that was a discussion that was a subject that entered almost every time that I met with Colonel North and with others.
Was there any discussion that you can recall at that meeting about corruption in the FDN ranks?
No, and much less the way that General Secord put it, because I would have been very much upset by something like that.
That's something you would have remembered, correct?
Yes.
And you don't remember any discussion
I do not
about
remember
that?
it, no.
Did anyone tell you at this meeting that General Secord and Colonel North were going to establish an airlift operation of their own?
No, not a word on that.
Robert Owen testified yesterday that Colonel North and General Secord made a decision in the summer of 1985 to take the funding away from you and put it in the hands of General Secord. Did anyone tell you about that kind of decision?
No, I was not told.
When did you learn that Colonel North and General Secord were operating this airlift operation in Central America?
Well, I never learned for sure that it was this gentleman running the operation, but the meeting was in July, so they say, and I remember that this airlift operation began almost a year later, in April of 1986.
Did you know in April of 1986, when the airlift operation was underway, that General Secord was connected with it?
Let's say I could have suspected it, but no, I never knew anything for sure on that. I had been told by Colonel North that there was going to be this private effort to help us, to aid us in that. I don't know when I was told about it, but I knew that Colonel North knew about a private airlift operation.
Did Colonel North consult with you about how the airlift operation should be structured and what it should do?
No.
Did Colonel North ever share with you the particulars of how the airlift operation was going to be run?
No. But we commented about it. I remember telling Colonel North that it was lousy.
You were upset with the services that were being provided by the operation,
Yes,
correct?
I expected it to be a lot more efficient.
What did they do for the FDN?
Well, I checked at one point, but then I'm not sure now, that they gave us 200 hours of flying time, mostly to deliver goods from a neighboring place, and but not very many. I don't remember how many trips into Nicaragua, which is what really counted.
Did the airlift operation supply you with any donated arms?
No, they didn't give us any. We had enough arms, we had enough ammunition.
So is it fair to say what the airlift operation did for the FDN was simply transport the FDN's weapons from one location to another?
Yes.
They would take weapons from an FDN warehouse that you had already purchased and deliver them to your troops, is that right?
Yes, sir. That was my understanding.
Did you also know that the airlift operation was being used to support the Southern Front troops?
Yes, I knew
Did
that.
you know about the existence of the airfield in Costa Rica?
I heard about it at some point, but I don't remember when.
Did Colonel North ever tell you that he had played a role in building that airstrip?
I remember talking with him about it, but,
What did he tell you about it?
well, that there was this airfield that was built in Costa Rica, and that it was built real quick. I heard something, as I said. But I had nothing to do with the South, and I hadn't even been to that country you mentioned for over 2 years, I guess.
Mr. Calero, is it fair to characterize your knowledge of the airlift operation as kind of sketchy?
Yes, I would say so.
Colonel North told you about it, but he didn't tell you too much about the details, and he didn't consult with you about how it should be run, is that
I
right?
never met any of the gentlemen, pilots involved in this operation.
Mr. Colero, Colonel North's appointment books show approximately 50 meetings with you between 1984 and 1986. Would you accept that as a fair estimate of the number of times you met with Colonel North?
Yes, I met with him every time I came to Washington, and sometimes we would meet very fast for one day, and he would have to leave, and maybe we'd talk 5 minutes, and then he said, come back in the afternoon or come back next day.
You have already testified that you discussed the contributions you were receiving with Colonel North, correct?
I informed him, yes.
And you also informed him of what arms you were purchasing.
I informed him that, yes.
What else did you talk about in these meetings?
Well, the general aspects, how the war was going, what our prospects were, what the internal situation here in the United States was. The overall, I had no, as I think I said before, I had no reservations when I spoke to Colonel North.
Did Colonel North ever give you military advice?
Well, we commented, let's say, on military things, and I remember talking about that it was best to take out helicopters on the ground. It was easier, cheaper.
That was in about November of 1984 that you had that discussion with him?
About that time, probably.
And that was specifically you were concerned about Hind helicopters that had been delivered to Nicaragua, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Did Colonel North ever give you intelligence information?
Well, he could have only known if it was really intelligence. I mean, I had no way to know. But we did discuss positions of Sandinista troops, and he did tell me about the Sandinistas massing up at some point, and about the Sandinista troops' threat, about a possible Cambodia operation by the Sandinistas.
Robert Owen testified that he was a courier from Colonel North carrying maps and photographs of Sandinista military equipment to you in November of 1984 and February of 1985. Did you get such maps and photographs from Robert Owen?
Well, I don't remember. I don't remember if he delivered them or not, or who delivered them, but I did see photographs in the region or here about these helicopters in the Managua airport, and I did see maps that showed Sandinista troop concentrations, and but those could have been prepared by our people too. And I saw maps.
Did you get them from Colonel North?
Directly from Colonel North, or
Either
through,
directly or indirectly. Did you get them from Colonel North?
They could have come. Yes, they could have come from him. And I remember maps with radar installations.
You wouldn't have gotten these maps from the CIA directly, would you?
No, the CIA sort of stayed away from us. Yes.
During the period the Boland Amendment was in effect, what kind of support did you get from the CIA?
They got support from us, I would say. I mean, we used to give them a lot of intelligence, a lot of information. They were always after us, trying to find out what we were doing.
In fact, you've characterized them as more of snoopers than helpers during this period. Is that right?
I used that word before, yes.
Mr. Calero, did you ever meet with the President of the United States?
Yes, sir. A number of 3-4 times, I believe.
When did you meet with him?
The first time in April of 1985, I think.
What was the purpose of that meeting?
Well, the UNO directory was introduced to him, and we met in the office of Mr. McFarland.
How long was the meeting?
I don't know, 10 minutes or so. I mean, it was more of a protocolary meeting, I would say.
In general, what did you discuss?
I don't think we came to a discussion. It was just a matter of meeting the president, thanking him for what he had done for us, and telling him about our decision, about our intent, about our coincidences.
Did you discuss the contributions you had been receiving with the president?
No.
You weren't thanking him for the contributions that you had received?
No, I was thanking him for his position vis-a-vis our situation.
Did you discuss with the president the assistance that Colonel North had been giving you?
No.
In any of the meetings with the president that you had, did you discuss either the contributions you had received or the support that Colonel North was giving you?
No, sir, no.
Mr. Calero, did there come a time when you gave traveler's checks to Colonel North?
Yes.
When did you first give him these traveler's checks?
Early spring 1985.
And in total, how much did you give him?
We're still checking. We figure it's $90,000, about $90,000.
And did you give him these $90,000 worth of checks on one occasion or over the course of several occasions?
Over the course of several occasions.
How did you come to give these checks to Colonel North?
In one of our meetings, he brought out the fact that there was a private effort going to liberate the American hostages.
Those are the hostages in Lebanon?
Yes. And so I reacted immediately, saying that hostages, Nicaraguan hostages of the Sandinistas, American hostages of these groups in Lebanon were one and the same, and that I was happy to help. I would be happy to help in their liberation.
What did he tell you about this private effort to get the hostages out?
I mean, aside from it being set up and needing support, nothing else.
Did Colonel North ask you for money in that occasion?
I mean, he didn't say, I mean, give me money, but I mean, I
It was clear to you from the context that he was looking for money from you, is
It
that
was
right?
clear, yes, that I could help, and I gladly did it.
How much did you give him on this first occasion?
I don't know if it was 15,000 or probably 25,000.
These checks that you gave him, they were drawn on a Cayman Islands bank, correct?
Yes,
And the checks were in blank so that whoever signed them could cash them, is that right?
yes.
And on how many other occasions did you give Colonel North checks?
Maybe 4 other occasions, 3, 4 other occasions.
And would Colonel North tell you that he needed more money and then you would bring it up to him, is that right?
Yes, yes.
Did you ever use Robert Owen as a courier to deliver checks to Colonel North?
Not that I remember.
Did Colonel North ever give you any other reason why he wanted these traveler's checks?
Well, he didn't give me any other reason, but I must say that at one point we discussed my passing money to other leaders of other factions of the resistance, and we came to the conclusion that it was not politically sound to do that. And at a later meeting, he told me that I would not have to do it, that another way had been found.
He never told you that the traveler's checks were going to be used to pay other Contra leaders, though, correct?
No, but I sort of imagined it.
And he didn't give you any other reason why he might need these checks, is that right?
No.
Is it fair to say that once you gave him these checks, you had no way of accounting for how he spent the money?
Well, I would not have, I didn't ask him to sign a receipt for them, and I didn't ask him how they had been used. I had trust that he would use that for the furthering of freedom's cause.
Robert Owen testified yesterday that Colonel North gave Owen $1,000 in traveler's checks as a wedding present. Did Colonel North tell you he was going to do that?
Not to my recollection.
Mr. Colero, the committee asked you to try to identify those checks that you gave to Colonel North and provide us with copies of those checks. Did you do that?
Yes, at your request, I provided you with such checks, yes, the cashed checks, yes.
And how certain are you that the checks you gave us are the same checks that you gave to Colonel North?
Well, aside from some that I am sure were not given to him, I would say the overwhelming majority of them were given to him, yes.
So there are some that you're not quite certain about, but most of them you believe
there's
are
some-
the same checks.
There's some I'm not quite certain. There's some I am quite certain I didn't give to him. And, but the majority, yes.
The committee also asked you to give us your bank account records from July 1984 to January 1987, and you provided those records to us, did you not?
Yes, I provided those records.
Are those records a complete accounting of the banking activity of the FDN from July 84 to January 1987?
Those are the only accounts we ever kept, and you received the totality of the records.
Mr. Chairman, I have no more questions of Mr. Colero. However, our GAO auditors have analyzed Mr. Colero's bank records from July 1984 through January 1987 and prepared 2 charts with which, your permission, I'd like to take a minute to explain.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first chart is displayed behind you, Mr. Chairman, and it explains the flow of money through the Colero bank accounts. As the chart shows, and by the way, the information contained on this chart is also reflected in Exhibit AC1. Mr. Colero received a total of approximately $33,600,000 in contributions. Of that $33,600,000, $32 million was received from a foreign government, which has been identified in other testimony as country number 2. Mr. Colero also received $200,000 from Lake Resources, $1,045,000 from Intel Cooperation, Inc., and $417,000 in miscellaneous deposits that the committee has not yet been able to identify. Mr. Colero earned $248,000 in interest on these deposits and spent all but $96,000 by January 1987. Approximately $19,178,000 was spent on arms and ammunition. As Mr. Colero testified today, he paid roughly $2 million to Gretsch World and R&M Supply, companies associated with Ron Martin and James McCoy. Approximately $11,350,000 was paid to Energy Resources, Mr. Secord's company, and $432,000 was paid to another arms company directly for one of the purchases made through General Secord. Finally, $5.3 million was paid to associates of General Singlaub for arms and ammunition. Of the remaining money, the records show that approximately $670,000 was paid to other Contra factions by the FDN, and approximately $14 million was paid for non-lethal supplies. The major recipients of these non-lethal supplies have been testified about by Mr. Colero, and they are listed on the chart. Mr. Chairman, the second chart I'd like to explain concerns the traveler's checks that were cashed by Colonel North. Of the $90,000 in blank traveler's checks that Mr. Colero testified he delivered to Colonel North, we have been able to identify approximately $25,000 worth that were cashed by DEA agents or their associates. In addition, we've been able to identify $2,440 worth of traveler's checks that were endorsed and cashed by Colonel North himself. A summary of these checks is reflected on the chart to my right. Of the checks cashed by Colonel North, 340 were cashed at food stores between April 21, 1985 and July 27, 1985 for purchases totaling $118.15. The balance was returned to Colonel North in cash. Another $220 in traveler's checks were cashed by Colonel North at other retail establishments between May 7 and November 30, 1985. Since most stores do not retain receipts for more than a year, we were able to identify only what was purchased at National Tire wholesalers. That $100 traveler's check was applied towards a $101 purchase of snow tires. The balance of the check cashed by Colonel North, $1,180 worth, were cashed and used at the businesses listed in the chart. There again, most of the institutions don't keep receipts for more than a year. Mr. Owen testified yesterday that Colonel North kept a ledger in which he recorded the traveler's checks and their disposition. That ledger was not found at the NSC, nor is there any other record of which we are aware which provides an accounting for the traveler's checks that Colonel North received from Mr. Colero. Therefore, we have no information with respect to the reason for the use of the checks by Colonel North other than what appears on the checks themselves and, in one case, the receipt from National Tire Wholesalers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Paul, is that in AC6, that chart?
Mr. Chairman, the information on that chart is also reflected in Exhibit AC6.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Barbadoro. We will now hear from Mr. Ken Ballin, the Deputy Attorney for the House Committee. Mr. Ballin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions, Mr. Calero.
I wish to now call upon Senator Heflin.
Mr. Colero, have you cooperated with the committees that are involved in this panel and with the independent counsel and have gotten all records for them voluntarily? And have you made yourself available for questioning it at the request of the various committees and the independent counsel?
Yes, sir.
You have not sought to remove yourself from the jurisdiction or sought any immunity, if any, were to be available to you?
No, sir.
Mr. Colero, you have a lapel pin on. Would you tell us what your lapel pin stands for?
This is the country, the flag of my country, Nicaragua.
Right. Would you introduce your counsel that is with you at the table?
Senator, my name is Joseph Portuondo.
And where are you from, sir?
Miami, Florida, sir.
Always believe in giving the lawyers a little advertising.
Thanks for the plug, Senator.
Mr. Colero, this investigation started on the issue of diversion of profits from Iranian arms sales to the Contras. Did you or any organization that you are connected with receive any of the money from the Iranian arms sales?
I have denied receiving any of the money from the Iran arms sales
Do you
from the
still,
beginning.
is that your opinion still today?
Well, I have seen that Lake Resources did send money, and so apparently we did get a minor, very minor portion if that money did, if the money in Lake Resources came from the diversion.
The deposits from Lake Resources are two checks, one in the amount of $175,000, the other in the amount of $25,000. Those deposits were made in your bank in November or October, as I recall, in the year 1985. According to the testimony that has been presented here by General Secord and others, the United States did not involve itself in a manner by which profits could have been diverted until February of 1986. Therefore, if the deposits were made before any diversion occurred of profits from an arms sale, then you did not receive any aid from any arms diversion to your group of Contras that were involved.
No, sir.
If any of the monies went to the benefit of the Contras, then they went to groups or provided services other than to you.
Yes, sir. The airlift.
Airlift could have possibly be
been.
monies that could have come from the arms sale. All right, so now in regards to the Lake Resources, Energy Resources, or the Hakeem Secord group, did you ever get any ammunition from them that you didn't pay for?
No, sir.
Did you ever get any grenades, rifles, mortars, or any other weapons from them that you
No, sir.
didn't pay for?
No, sir. I have stated that after the sea lift number 2, we did receive what was short-shipped at a later date.
All right, but you had paid for those.
I had paid for those, yes.
So the short shipment of ammunition that came from Energy Resources, it may have come at a later time, were still those that you paid for.
We paid for this.
All right, so now in regards to the airdrops, where weapons were used or supplies were used, did they not come from your warehouses and were not equipment, ammunition that might have been acquired by the lake resources of that group?
My understanding was that they came from our warehouses, and not only that, but that we supplied some of our materials also to be dropped in the southern front.
All right, so I believe the testimony has been that there were 9 airdrops that Lake Resources was involved in or an agency connected therewith. Would that be approximately right in according to your knowledge?
Just about, yes.
All right, at the same time, in the year 1986, during that entire year of 86, what was the troop number of troops that were in the northern front?
During 1986,
1986.
we had in border areas, we could have had about 12,000, and deep inside the country, over 4,000.
All right, then you would say somewhere in the neighborhood 15, 16,000, something like that.
16,000.
All right, how many troops were there who were resisting the Sandinistas in the southern front at this time in 86?
Those are, I only have estimates for that and hearsay. I had no way of
Well,
confirming it.
what's your best judgment?
A few hundred,
Few hundred.
yes.
All right, sir. Now, you mentioned your visits to the president. Did he at any time during that conversations with the president indicate to you any statement or anything that would indicate that he knew anything about the diversion of arms sales from Iran to aid the Contras?
No, sir.
Did you meet with the vice president?
In a protocolary visit in which we expressed our gratitude and he expressed his willingness to continue to insist on aid to us.
How many visits did you have with the vice president?
One in his office, but I had met him in various 2 or 3 socio-political events, let's say.
But only one time in his office?
Only one time in his office, yes.
All right, so now, you have made available to these records, and I didn't think I'm not trying to be critical or say derogatory remarks about you, but the natural questions that come to mind on the accounting system and the use of traveler's checks and the cash raises questions. And I want to give you every opportunity to explain these questions. Chara, traveler's checks, cash that's dispersed. Anything of this raises the question that corruption could take place. Now, we realize that there's a lot of secrecy that is necessary in an operation like you carried on. But you yourself are a businessman. It's my understanding that you taught accounting at the University of Central America, that you were the dean of faculty of the School of business administration and economics at this university. Would you tell us in a basis why there is an absence of what you would normally expect of accountability pertaining to the business transactions of your keeping of the books, of the people who kept the books under your direction?
No, we have books, and we have trunkfuls of invoices, canceled invoices, which we put at your disposal of some of the members of the council members, let's say, of this committee. And we have most of our business was done through bank transfers that can be very easily traced. As you see, only about 10% was used in traveler checks, and that we did on account of the expediency, on account of the fact that it can be protected. I mean, the person who has them can be protected if he loses them, and the fact that we foreigners make a lot of use. There's a customary habit to make use of traveler checks, and we were not charged any commission by the bank issuing the checks, which was another advantage.
Well, traveler's checks raise the question in relative to the contras. The soldier in the field can't cash a traveler's check. The Indian or the Creoles don't cash traveler's checks.
Well, we used to purchase Cordobas for them.
Well, now $3 million in traveler's checks, basically Barra traveler's checks, naturally raises suspicions. Why? I'm still at a loss to understand why this, and why, for example, we have there up in the accounting there's $5,660,000 some odd dollars that still in the effort to try to get to the bottom of it, we are informed that some of those are cash, some of those are just unknowns, which would indicate that the books and the records raise some question as to these issues. So I just want you to have a full opportunity to explain any of this and try to eliminate these questions that exist in my mind and in other people's minds.
Well, we can account for the use of traveler checks. We can account for every one of the transactions that are listed there, and we have invoices, we have records that will show that everything was properly used, and you're welcome to all those records that we have.
Excuse me, Senator. May I interrupt for one moment? There's something missing from these proceedings that should be known. And that is that I personally went to Central America with investigators from your staff, made available to them the records which would show every single expenditure on those charts. I confirmed that willingness for us to provide that information to you, and that has not been followed through. That willingness still holds true. We can account for every dime spent, and we have the records to prove that. Excuse me?
In the region.
Central America.
Are they available to this committee?
They have been available to this committee since February.
Thank you.
Well, I would assume, knowing my chairman, that we will make every effort if there has been some reason why they have not been, but this to me needs to be cleared up. It needs to be cleared up for people who have supported the Contra. And I might say that in the Senate committee, that in the selection, the majority leader selected 6 members, and 3 of them had consistently, including myself, supported the Contras. And these are naturally questions that arise that we, in believing that taxpayer dollars or any other money that is, wherever it comes from, it ought to be accountable for. And so if it can be cleared up, it would be very helpful. Now, you had how many bank accounts?
We had 6 bank accounts.
And where were they?
They were in Panama and Cayman Islands, and one of them in Miami, but International Department of Barclays, I believe.
All right, so in the chart that we see some people who are in effect money brokers or money changers, Marin, Lacayo, and those people that are there, which had pretty sizable monies. As I understand it, they were in effect transferring currency from one country to the currency of another country. Is that primarily what they would do?
Yes.
Well, with bank accounts in the Cayman Islands and in Panama, why do you use money changes? Could not those banks issue it in the currency of the country where it was to be used?
Well, I do not think so, and if they would have done it at a much lower exchange rate that we were able to obtain ourselves.
In other words, the ones that you used, Maureen and the other one there, you would have used that because you would have saved money?
We would have, either saved money or made or cashed our dollars at a better exchange rate.
All right, sir. Now, you had worked with the CIA before this private money came in. Were there accounting systems that the CIA required you to follow relative to expenditures?
Yes, we gave them an accounting. It was a very simple accounting, just so much received and so much out, and we supplied those. I was not directly in charge of it.
All right, so now, did you have any relationship with Haas and Foss or Sam Hall, who were captured? They were not a part of any operation that you were conducting?
No, sir.
All right. Now, we mentioned the Southern Front, and involved in this period of time that efforts were being made to help the resistance on the Southern Front. Were you making contributions to the Southern Front also?
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, we gave Mr. Chamorro, listed there with 50,000. We supplied him with $230,000, actually, and we gave them also materials whenever we could, but it was very difficult to us to deliver such materials.
You happen to have any idea of the value of the contributions that you were making to the Southern Front?
It would be difficult because we supplied them with weapons and ammunition that we already had, but that is cash supplied to them. And we also supplied the Kisan with food and weapons and ammunition, which is not listed there because we assumed it within our records.
Now, you purchased arms from General Seaglob and Barbara Studley. Was the price of the arms that you purchased from them substantially lower than the prices that you had paid to other arms merchants?
Well, I only dealt with 3 different people in the purchase of weapons, actually, and we got first weapons we purchased were on credit, about 5,000 rifles on credit. and we paid $300 per rifle, G3s, and then from General Secord we got some real good prices on, especially in ammunition brought from the Far East, down to about $75,000 a thousand, which is good, and then through General Singlaub's friends, we also got very, very good prices, you know.
It is your understanding that the General Secord purchase came from Poland?
General Secord's, no.
No, Singlaub.
General Singlaub's, I understand that that they were manufactured in Poland, anyway.
Is it your understanding that the weapons that General Secord was involved in came from country 4?
Well, I don't know which country 4 is.
You don't know country 4, but
but they came from Europe.
they came from Europe, or did they come from Asia?
From Asia, some, and from Europe, the second shipment.
Well, was it rather surprising to you that a great number of the arms that you were buying were coming from Marxist countries?
Well, I'm never surprised of anything the Marxists do.
Well, I suppose that's we are learning more and more of that in this entire investigation. Now, you made it, in my judgment, a very excellent opening statement. Would you give us some idea now of the effectiveness of the Contra force in Nicaragua and what you anticipate could be done if it is supported?
Well, since December, when the aid from the United States began to be effective, we have re-infiltrated from border areas about 9,000 men. They were scattered throughout the country of Nicaragua. The Sandinista government has been hurting greatly. We have even gotten some good press and papers in this town here, which wasn't the fact before. And we have gotten the people of Nicaragua to become more hopeful, more enthusiastic, more participative in the effort to free our country. And definitely, if we have sustained U.S. support, which we have not had to the present time, it will be a clear message to friend and foe in Nicaragua and the surrounding countries, and we will, within a reasonable period of time, of months, be able to bring about a climate of collapse of this repressive government in our country, and we will repeat what happened with the Somoza regime.
Thank you, sir. That's all.
Congressman Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colero, you have testified that when you joined the FDN in February of '83, that the Contras were being supported by the CIA. Were they receiving assistance from any other group, governmental or private?
When I came there, I met with some Argentine military who had been also helping, and for a time, I understand, were the go-between our representatives and U.S. government officers.
Mr. McFarland testified that covert CIA support for the Contras began in 1981. Who funded the Contras prior to that time?
Prior to that time, It was an spontaneous, I was not part of it, but it was an spontaneous reaction to the repression of the Sandinista regime on the
Who
part,
funded them?
on the
Who
part
gave
of,
them the money?
well, there was almost no money involved in the first people who began to react against the Sandinista government. Just farmers, peasants who had helped the Sandinistas before and now began to fight them.
Now, General Singlov indicated that he provided $5 million worth of weapons to you in 1985.
Yes, sir.
About right, about $5 million, give or take, $200,000 or $300,000.
We paid for them, yes.
He says that he charged you $135 US for AK-47s.
Yes.
Was that right?
Right, sir.
And what were you charged by your other suppliers for AK-47, just that rifle?
Yes. Well, AK-47s and G3s, I remember seeing prices of $180 or so, $200, and then for the G3s we paid $300, and previous to that, I understand that the FAL Belgian rifles, Belgian automatic rifles, had been purchased for $600 apiece.
And did you pay $250 for some AK-47s from General Secord?
In the second sea lift, I do not remember the exact price, but that could be it, yes.
Yeah. How about Roy Martin?
We paid for the G3s that we bought from him on credit, $300 some odd dollars.
Now, you understand that the difference between the $135 that you paid General Singlov and the $250 that you paid for AK-47 to General Secord is about $115.
Yes, but my
And
understanding
on
was
1,000 rifles, that's $115,000 that you left on the table when you made that trade with him.
and the United States government had paid $600 for the FAL rifles that had been given to us.
Yeah, well, why is that?
Well, because there are prices, and of course, General Singlov's price offer was outstanding. But and it was made after we had made these purchases at different prices.
What happened to those weapons?
The weapons that
Did you get them?
General Singlov's?
Yeah.
Oh, our forces. That is the rifle our forces are fighting with now, to this day.
Well, were they stopped in Honduras and put in a warehouse? You have some difficulty with them?
They came to Central America and were given to us, and they all have been distributed now.
They now have all been issued? Was there some delay in that?
Issued. Not on those rifles that I remember.
That you remember?
No,
You could check on that, though.
I could check and see when they began to be. I supplied an inventory of supplies, and from there you can, the council
try
can
and
see.
track that.
Yes, yes.
Now, why did Colonel North and General Secord quit transferring money to your own accounts for you to purchase weapons, and instead, at this point, when you bought that from Singlov, they then began to buying and delivering weapons themselves,
Well,
obviously at higher prices?
but I did not get those weapons that they buy if they bought any weapons, and it would be necessary to ask them. I would be judging something that,
You didn't get them.
no,
They bought them for you, but you didn't get them?
well, no, I don't know if they bought them from me. I don't know even if they bought any. That would have to come from them, I would say, sir. The answer.
Now, Mr. Colero, were you involved in any way in the CIA project to mine the Nicaraguan harbors in 1984?
Well, our involvement, there was one of our men, I believe was Comandante Bermudez, took a trip down the Nicaraguan coast and stayed for 3 or 4 days out in the ocean at one point. That was back in 1983. And during the period of the of the mining. So yes, I mean, we had.
You had something to do
So
with
we
it.
had something to do with it, yes.
I note that you were quoted in the New York Times in April 20th, 1984, as saying, "We claim there are no Americans involved. Not one United States system is involved in the mining."
Yes, and I was referring to the actual placing of the mines, and I still say it to this day, no American citizen was involved.
Who did place them?
Operatives that had been,
Operators?
well, people who were familiar with the Nicaraguan coast, probably some Nicaraguans and some people who were piloting or
Would there have been Americans?
no.
Couldn't have been any Americans.
Throughout these years, I have understood there were no Americans
Who
involved.
told you where to put them? You just kind of scattered them out, or did you have some pattern? Or?
That's strictly a military thing that was done, and I was not familiar with
Where
the
did you get
exact-
the mines?
I understand that the mines were made, the very small mines, they were made in the region.
Made where?
In the region, in the
the
Central
region.
American region, yes.
And who paid the operators to put those in?
I don't know, sir, who paid them.
Well, now you said you met with the president for 3 or 4 times, and one time you met with him for 10 minutes, and you thanked him, but not for money, just thanked him for his general attitude of encouragement.
Yes,
That was
yes.
your testimony. And you said no one attended that meeting with you. You went by yourself.
No, I said that we had.
We?
Meaning the 3 directors of the unified Nicaraguan opposition.
All 3 of you went to that meeting.
Yes, sir.
Now the other meetings, you had 3 other meetings.
Yes.
Did you all 3 go to those other meetings?
Yes,
All 3 of you?
all 3 of us, and then I had the opportunity to be with the president at a social, 1 or 2 other socio-political events where I went in line to say hello to him. Yes.
Now, when the 3 of you went to see him, to see the president the 3 other times, was anybody else with the president at that time?
The first meeting was, I remember Colonel North, who escorted us to the place, and Mr. McFarland, and I believe that was it. The second meeting, it involved more people, but I would not
Did it
remember.
include Colonel North and Bud
Yeah, Colonel
McFarland?
Colonel North always escorted us over.
Always
to the-
brought you in.
Yes.
Was Mr. McFarland there at the other meetings?
I do not remember. I think it was Mr. Poindexter.
Now, Mr. Calero, according to your deposition, after you began receiving this money from foreign sources, this $33.5 million, procurement of supplies was handled by various individuals, including your brother.
Yes.
Now, what were the financial arrangements under which your brother handled this procurement?
He
Or
handled
these procurement matters?
Yes. He handled these procurements for us in the city of New Orleans, and then continued to handle these procurements during the period when the State Department was giving us the humanitarian money. And the State Department, the NHAO office, Nicaraguan Humanitarian Assistance Office, checked on the suppliers, approved them, checked on the items that could be purchased and approved them, checked on the prices of the items that were purchased and approved them, and then made the payment. And since this has come up and is something that really concerns me because of it being my brother, the General Accounting Office made an audit of that operation in New Orleans, and it cleared it. It is the only operation of ours on account of jurisdictional problems that has been cleared by the GAO. And I thank you for asking me that question and clearing that situation.
I'm glad. And he doesn't manufacture boots, your brother?
No, he bought from
He's a
different...
broker? What would you say his role is?
Well, his role was buying for us at the best price, the best opportunity.
He's just a buyer.
Timely, and I told him to, at one point I told him to obtain letters from each one of the suppliers, notarized letters, in which indicated exactly what his role had been and what their relationship had been.
And he's not another one of these patriots without profit, though, is he?
He did not earn, never got a commission, those letters say.
No commission.
Never asked for a commission, and he had a living allowance, I believe, of $2,000 a month.
And that was it?
Because he had quit the job he had, and he had given up on an interest that he had in a greenhouse.
Well, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colero, thank you for your testimony. I think that you may do for traveler's checks what Carl Malden has done for American Express. But I'd like to ask you about 1983. We talked a little bit about the mining of harbors. Were you involved in the planning of an attack on the Managua airport in 1983, September of 83?
No, sir. I think that attack was performed by the Southern Front.
I had a little bit of a personal interest since I arrived that day. And, just want to know who was doing the planning at that time. When you joined the FDN, I assume you did so out of a commitment to remove the Sandinistas from power. You saw them as a cancer upon the country, did you not?
Yes, sir.
And it's never been any doubt in your mind or those of your followers that your intent and goal was to clear them out of Nicaraguan society.
Yes, sir.
Right. You didn't join the FDN simply to interdict arms going into El Salvador?
No, sir, but I felt that there was no contradiction.
Right. But that was not your purpose to simply,
that was not
your men were not going out there fighting to lay down their lives to simply stop the flow of weapons going to a neighboring country?
No, sir, definitely not.
And you certainly weren't jeopardizing your lives simply to harass the Sandinistas sort of on the periphery, to keep them preoccupied?
No, sir.
Your goal from the beginning has been to remove Sandinistas militarily.
Well, we have always thought, and we had the recent experience of Somoza, that to change the situation in Nicaragua, we had to have a strong military offensive plus a political offensive,
but you never
a
believed
diplomatic offensive.
You never believed the Sandinistas were going to negotiate away their power?
No, not without military pressure.
Even with military pressure, from your own studies of history, have you ever known a communist government to negotiate away its power?
Never.
So it was never your intent, really, to try and negotiate with the Sandinistas unless it was surrender on their part?
Well, or unless it was a life-saving situation on their part.
Well, if you were on the outskirts of Managua and the Sandinistas said, can't we talk at this point? Are you going to lay down your weapons? No.
No, I don't believe in surrendering and then negotiating.
Well, the reason I raise these questions is because there are a number of representations made to the United States Congress. You commented very eloquently in your opening statement about the on and off again policies, the contradictions, the internal divisions, not only within Nicaragua, but within the United States Congress and the United States itself. And part of the difficulty has come about by virtue of the fact that the administration over a period of time has represented different things to the United States Congress and therefore the American people, namely that we're only using you for the purpose of interdicting the flow of arms. This would be the purpose of providing you with a limited amount of weapons and materiel, not to help remove the Sandinistas, but to stop the flow of weapons going elsewhere. And that lasted for a short period of time, and then we had another rationale, which was to simply harass the Sandinistas, to keep them from consolidating their power. But that's not the reason that you were out there fighting, and that representation, if that were represented to you, that that's what we were doing, that would not be, let me rephrase it, would it be somewhat of a deceit to you to suggest that we were only there to use you to help us prevent the flow of arms going elsewhere?
Well, we understood that you had to have a reason acceptable by this government in order for us to be supported. And since support to us means so much, I mean, we have to comply with conditions that we do not necessarily like or think are appropriate.
You didn't like the particular conditions that were laid down to you?
No, but we have very little choice.
You had no choice under the circumstances. Were you ever advised by either Colonel North or Mr. Owen or anyone else to say or never say that your intent was to overthrow the Sandinistas?
I have always said what I think was right, and but of course I have taken care not to come right on or head on with policies of these administrations or with interests of this country, which I have always looked after as long as they were not in contradiction with the interest of our country.
I take it your answer is that you were told not to say that your intent was to overthrow the Sandinistas.
I don't remember. Someone said that was said before I joined the FDN, you know, at a meeting in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, when I was still in Nicaragua.
Now, you've talked about President Reagan's meeting. Was Admiral Poindexter present at any of these meetings?
Yes, Admiral Poindexter was present at our second and third meeting, probably, or our third meeting. Yes.
Again, never any discussion about fundraising during those meetings?
No, sir, not at all.
How about the Vice President?
The Vice President was present. I don't remember if he was present in one, but we visited. The three directors of UNO at the time visited the Vice President.
Where was that?
We had a scheduled meeting with him the day of the unfortunate accident of the Challenger, and that was canceled, and then it was put on later on, a few months later, and we had a protocolary visit with the Vice President.
A matter of minutes?
A matter of minutes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
I do not remember. Mr. Gregg was present in the next one. I do not remember.
So your contact with the Vice President is very limited?
Very limited, yes. I would classify
a matter of protocol only?
Yes, sir.
Right. Now, with respect to General Secord, you apparently ordered the arms in 1984, the summer of 84, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you paid for them in December of 84?
There was an advance at some point,
right.
And then...
and they arrived in April of 85?
Yes, sir.
On that slow boat that you referred to?
Yeah.
Now, you were led to believe, according to what you said this morning, that General Secord held himself out as the one who brought about that rather substantial contribution.
Yes, I had an impression that he had helped.
And you felt rather indebted to do business with him as a result of that, didn't you?
Well, I had done business even before the substantial contribution came, and the prices that he got in the slow boat, for purpose of identification, were extremely good. $75 per 1,000 rounds of ammunition is unbeatable. And
did you ever have any suspicions that there was a profit being made?
It did, even though I was told that that was not the case. It did come up, yes.
Did you ever have a conversation with General Singlab pertaining to whether a profit was being made?
Well, General Singlab thought that there was a profit being made, and he told me so, yes.
He told you there was a profit being made?
Yeah, he told me there was a profit being made, but that was after I had made the...
Did you prefer to do business with General Singlab?
Well, the friendship and the affection that I have developed with General Singlab is difficult to have for other people.
I take it the answer is you preferred to do business with him?
Yes, sir.
All right. Did you ever tell General Secord that General Singlab was going to deliver certain weapons from a certain country, and that General Secord responded by saying he can't deliver?
Yeah, yeah. He thought I mean, the price was so low that he thought he couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he told me that. Yeah.
So you thought you had a pretty good price going through General Singlab, and General Secord said he can't deliver on that?
Yeah, he thought that it would be extremely difficult to come through,
Was the implication is you should do business with me?
Well, I mean, if that was the implication, I didn't pay any attention to it.
You continue to do business with General Singlab?
Yes.
Did you ever complain to Robert Owen that you was either being overcharged or, in common parlance, ripped off by anyone?
No, you know, that was because I kept my comments, I'm not one to go around commenting things, you know, with just anyone. That was been my brother, who is a bit more expressive than I am.
Well, did you ever express it to your brother?
No. I don't
How would your brother come to speak with Mr. Owen?
Well, because my brother was, he's a great conversationalist, and he was in touch with General Singlab and he came down to the region, you know, and he was always asking things and inquiring. And
So in this memo that was provided to the committee pertaining to Robert Owen, the following is said: Mario told me in Miami why Adolfo and company are upset with me and freezing me out. I'm looked upon as the responsible party for a number of the problems they're having. They look at me as the one carrying the water for you. I mean, you always knew that Mr. Owen was carrying the water for Oliver North, didn't you?
well, even though I was, our organization was paying Mr. Owen, I mean, we knew that he would be informing.
He was TC, wasn't he? He was the courier.
Yeah, the courier, yeah.
What was your code name, by the way?
You know, I was surprised to learn that mine was Sparkplug. I have always thought of myself as being sort of calm.
Just one meeting with the Vice President?
One meeting, one official formal meeting.
Any of his subordinates like Mr. Gregg? Did you ever meet with Donald?
I met with Mr. Gregg, and he took care of us the day the Vice President couldn't do it on the Challenger day. And then I do not remember Mr. Gregg was present in the next one. I do not remember.
So your contact with the Vice President is very limited?
Very limited, yes, I would
A
classify
matter of
it.
protocol only?
Yes, sir.
Now, with respect to General Secord, you apparently ordered the arms in 1984, the summer of '84, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you paid for them in December of '84.
There was an advance at some point, and then...
And they arrived in April of '85.
Yes, sir.
On that slow boat that you referred to.
Yeah.
Now, you were led to believe, according to what you said this morning, that General Secord held himself out as the one who brought about that rather substantial contribution.
Yes, I had an impression that he had helped.
And you felt rather indebted to do business with him as a result of that, didn't you?
Well, I had done business even before the substantial contribution came, and the prices that he got in the slow boat, for purpose of identification, were extremely good. $75 per 1,000 rounds of ammunition is unbeatable. And
did you ever have any suspicions that there was a profit being made?
It did, even though I was told that that was not the case, it did come up, yes.
Did you ever have a conversation with General Singlab pertaining to whether a profit was being made?
Well, General Singlab thought that there was a profit being made, and he told me so, yes.
He told you there was a profit being made?
Yeah, he told me there was a profit being made, but that was after I had made the...
Did you prefer to do business with General Singlab?
Well, the friendship and the affection that I have developed with General Singlab is difficult to have for other people.
I take it the answer is you preferred to do business with him?
Yes, sir.
All right. Did you ever tell General Secord that General Singlab was going to deliver certain weapons from a certain country, and that General Secord responded by saying he can't deliver?
Yeah. He thought I mean, the price was so low that he thought he couldn't do it. Yeah, he told me that. Yeah.
So you thought you had a pretty good price going through General Singlab, and General Secord said he can't deliver on that?
Yeah, he thought that it would be extremely difficult to come through,
Was the implication is you should do business with me?
Well, I mean, if that was the implication, I didn't pay any attention to it.
You continue to do business with General Singlab?
Yes.
Did you ever complain to Robert Owen that you was either being overcharged or, in common parlance, ripped off by anyone?
No, that was because I kept my comments, I'm not one to go around commenting things, with just anyone. That was been my brother, who is a bit more expressive than I am.
Well, did you ever express it to your brother?
No. I don't
How would your brother come to speak with Mr. Owen?
Well, because my brother was, he's a great conversationalist, and he was in touch with General Singlab and he came down to the region, and he was always asking things and inquiring. And
So in this memo that was provided to the committee pertaining to Robert Owen, the following is said: Mario told me in Miami why Adolfo and company are upset with me and freezing me out. I'm looked upon as the responsible party for a number of the problems they're having. They look at me as the one carrying the water for you. I mean, you always knew that Mr. Owen was carrying the water for Oliver North, didn't you?
Well, even though our organization was paying Mr. Owen, I mean, we knew that he would be informing.
He was TC, wasn't he? He was the courier.
Yeah, the courier, yeah.
What was your code name, by the way?
I was surprised to learn that mine was Sparkplug. I have always thought of myself as being sort of calm.
Didn't you have another code name? Does Barnaby ring a bell?
That's it, Barnaby. Yeah, that I used myself, Barnaby.
Where did Barnaby come from?
I don't know. One day I was asked by Colonel North, to think up of a name, and that was my maternal grandfather's name. Yes.
Okay, I am looked upon as the one carrying the water for you. They are saying I'm intimately tied to Secord. You had no doubt that he was working with Secord, Mr. Owen.
No, I did not associate necessarily with Secord, no.
And among the things they connect me to are the following: the purchase of the malls at a higher price than necessary. Did you ever complain about the price of the malls?
No, but I heard General Singlab say that was pretty expensive, and then General Singlab used to talk to my brother too on the side. And that probably came from General Singlab. Yes.
General Singlab stirring up a little trouble on the side with your brother?
Still in trouble?
No, is he stirring up a little trouble on the side with your brother? In other words, he's talking to your brother about the high price of these...
Oh yeah, they probably commented because they are friends also, you see.
And the stopping of the export of the Lady Ellen helicopter, did you ever complain about that?
Right now we have a helicopter that has been donated to us by a private donor, and it's still sitting in this country, and that's a helicopter we need for medevac, and I don't know...
You must have complained about it then, didn't you?
Yeah, I must have, yeah. I'm complaining about this other one now.
How about bringing GAD into the picture?
I don't remember ever meeting. I don't know Mr. GAD, and my brother does though, because he was in charge of air transportation.
Okay. Well, let me go on to the NAO funding. According to this memo, talking about sort of transferring money, exchanging money from American dollars into lempiras or whatever, and that there's a profit being made, some 37% profit, and Adolfo admitted to Dumling, Ambassador Dumling, and Arcos, that he's splitting this 50-50 with Marin, and that your share is going to the war effort. Is that what you were doing?
Well, I would not have permitted anyone to take a share in it, and we did make a profit, which was informed to NHAO, and the profit was incorporated in our income, and we reported that to Ambassador Dumling, and it was shown in our books, and the total profit on that came to somewhat over $1 million, and that's part of our income. And the money exchanger, the money broker, has a small fee, commission, which would never amount to 50%. I mean, that would have been outright stupidity on our part to have accepted such a division.
So as far as come back to Mr. Owen now, he worked for you prior to going to work for the NAO?
Yes, sir.
You trusted him?
Yes, I trust him. I think he's a good man.
You
yes.
signed a letter to that effect that
Yes, sir.
recommending him.
Yes, sir.
Did you come to distrust him as his memo indicated to
Well,
us?
but it was, I mean, we became, let's say, I went to say hello to him after, and he said, thank you for talking to me, and I didn't know why I wouldn't talk to him yesterday. But let's say that he began to hang around with people in this country that had always bad-mouthed the FDN and that were always trying to undermine our directing the FDN and undermine the FDN too.
You thought he was hanging with people, around with people who were undermining your efforts?
Our efforts, yes. Our effort, I mean, the FDN they were favoring other factions and other Americans that entered into this, let's say, internal differences of the Nicaraguan opposition.
If Colonel North had asked you about whether you would approve a gift of $1,000 to Mr. Owen, would you have objected?
I would have considered it a payment, a compensation, let's say. I would have considered
You wouldn't have had a
compensation.
problem with that?
I would not have objected.
And you didn't have a problem with him requesting $50,000 in traveler's checks because it was going to the DEA for a rescue or
well, I didn't know it
rescue?
was going to the, I found that until recently.
But if you did, you wouldn't have had a problem.
Oh, no. I mean, I gave him that money for a worthy effort, which I consider was one and the same with our own effort.
But you didn't know what the effort was.
Oh, yes, I knew.
He told you what it was going to be for.
Oh, yeah, for the hostages, yes,
Right.
yes.
As a practical matter, anything that Colonel North asked you, you had to comply with?
No,
No?
no.
Well, wasn't he your only source of funding, as a matter of fact?
No, I didn't consider him my only source of funding because
Where else did you get the money? The charts show that you raised a total of $34 million, 32 of it came from one country.
Yeah, from one country, but I didn't think that he was, he was a man of enough stature, I think, not to bring in...
No, but as a practical matter, he was the man controlling the funds and controlling your ability to acquire weapons during this period of time from 84 through 86. As a practical matter, wasn't
Well,
it?
let's say one thing. I had very high respect for Colonel North, and he was very respectful with me, and we had a very, very good relationship, yes, sir.
But the point was that you were, in fact, indebted to the United States for the country that was helping to arrange the financing. Without the United States and Colonel North, you would not have been in a position to continue the war effort.
Oh, I realized that if the United States didn't wink an eye to other countries, we wouldn't get anything. And I was told so by foreign officials that I addressed myself to, aside from where the $32 million came from. I said, we need money. Well, he says, if the United States will...
You also received some M79 grenades and grenade launchers. Were you aware of those coming from the United States?
M79 grenades and grenade launchers, which they had been short-shipped in the Sea Lift number 2.
Right, but they were of U.S. manufacture?
I never checked.
Never checked?
No.
Did you ever receive any night fighting equipment, night scopes?
We have. I believe we have 2 night scopes now, and all the pilots that are now flying at night have night flight equipment. Yes.
How about Bushmasters?
Bushmasters.
Type of weapon?
Bushmasters.
No.
I'm not.
Never
heard of.
You were in charge of getting the weapons.
Yeah, but I never got anything, nor did I ever know that there was something called Bushmasters. Huh?
Were you aware of a discussion about turning over the airlift equipment to the United States, the CIA? Were you ever aware that there was an effort, once funding started to be resumed by the Congress, that there was some discussions about turning back assets to the CIA?
No, sir, I was not.
You're not
I
part
was
of
not
that
aware.
at all?
But I remember my saying that I wish we could have those planes.
Could I turn your attention to a document that we received? It's addressed to my friend, and it's approximately February of '85. Did you ever receive a document from Colonel North?
I have looked at that letter a number of times, and the information it has, I'm familiar with, thoroughly familiar with. I saw a draft of, as a matter of fact, where the 20 million had been scratched out, and but I do not recall and I've been really trying my memory on that one. I do not recall getting that letter.
Well, if I were to tell you that that letter contained information pertaining to intelligence about the Sandinistas, you wouldn't disagree that you had that conversation, if not the memo itself, or the letter itself.
I don't know, well, I mean, I've seen the letter, but I don't remember the
I
exact
think
contents.
you've already indicated in your previous testimony that you discussed intelligence matters before.
Yes.
And you also discussed military battle plans as such as well, did you not?
Well, I have said that with the information gathered from conversations with Colonel North, we never planned nor carry out any operation.
Were you ever under the impression that you were controlled by the CIA?
Controlled,
Under the control and direction of a CIA agent?
well, I don't feel that I could be controlled by
Were you ever under the impression that you were being, quote, handled by the Central Intelligence Agency? Someone was there assisting you, directing you, carrying messages back and forth?
No. I here again, my relationship with CIA people has been one of respect and mutual respect.
And if Colonel North had ever said that you were being handled by an agent, that would be incorrect in your judgment?
Yes, but I've heard the expression of at times of that someone is assigned to someone, that he's something. But
Someone assigned to you?
No. I've never had one particular person assigned to me that I know of.
You may have had a series of separate individuals assigned to you?
I might have been trailed or tailed or whatever you call it without my realizing it.
Thank you very much.
Very much. The committee will stand in recess until 2 o'clock this afternoon. At that time, the questioning will be resumed by Congressman Cheney.
Y esto de nosotros. Eso lo damos aquí.
The hearing will please come to order. The chair recognizes Congressman Cheney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colero, I want to join my colleagues in thanking you for your testimony. It's been very helpful in helping us understand all of this. And also, as a strong supporter of your efforts, I know a great many other members would join with me in thanking you for your courageous and inspired leadership of a very worthy cause in Central America. I'd like to take just a minute, if I could, at the outset and clarify some confusion that I think developed this morning pursuant to some of the questions that were asked by Senator Heflin. A number of people have commented as the hearing broke up that the impression that somehow a lot of this money that's up on the chart behind us here is unaccounted for or can't be traced, or we don't know how it was spent. Talking with staff and counsel, and perhaps your counsel would care to respond, it's my understanding that we have in fact had access to the records of how that money was spent, that those records are indeed quite thorough, and that there is not a big pot of money that flowed to you and the FDN that is unaccounted for. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
And that those records have been available to us since February and have indeed been reviewed by staff counsel?
We visited Central America sometime in the...
You want to pull the microphone closer?
We visited Central America in the latter part of February with 3 people from this committee. They took a look at the records, decided it was too large to go through it at that point. When we returned to the United States, I was asked to make those records available. I said I'd be willing to do that. I've confirmed that in writing to this committee, and it was never followed up.
And I want to add that our financial department in 4 years has changed places 14 times. And in spite of that, we have records to account for whatever money was spent, and that they are at the disposal of this committee.
Well, having looked at it, my own impression is that the accounting has been good. In fact, it's better than some of the programs that the federal government operates. I also would like, if I might, for just a minute, to focus on the traveler's checks that we have displayed up here that allegedly were cashed by Colonel North. Again, there seems to be some confusion, but as I understand it, and counsel can correct me for the committee if I'm wrong, Category 1, we have specific checks cashed in food stores. Category 2, in retail stores. Category 3, some $1,800, almost $1,900 is basically unknown. We don't know what the purpose was. May well have been for expenses in connection with your operation. Would that be a fair statement, Mr. Calero? Pan American Airways, etc.?
Yes, travel, I would imagine.
Yeah. Now, these are not taxpayers' dollars, is that not correct?
Those are not taxpayers' dollars. Those monies came to us from foreign sources.
Right. And so that any impression that people might have that somehow we're talking about U.S. government funds here, either on that board or the boards behind me, simply isn't correct.
Those are not U.S. government funds, and those are not even U.S. citizens' funds, because they came from foreign sources.
Okay. So any implication that somehow Colonel North or the FDN under your leadership was misspending U.S. government money would be totally in error and totally inaccurate.
Right, sir.
Okay. I'd like to move on, if I can't, in a lot of territory to cover, but it's my understanding, based on your earlier testimony, you were in fact jailed by Mr. Somoza.
Yes, sir. I was jailed a number of times over the years, and the last time in September of '78, and there's a witness here to that because he helped me get me out of jail. Congressman Facel was instrumental in springing me out of jail.
I didn't know he had that talent, Mr. Calero. It's my understanding that in the '78 instance you were jailed for helping organize a general strike in Nicaragua.
Yes.
It'd be fair to say you were pleased to see Mr. Somoza depart the country as president.
Definitely, sir.
Was the U.S. government involved in his departure? It was my understanding that we did, in fact, intervene fairly dramatically to encourage him to depart.
I would say that you intervened 7 months too late.
Too late.
Yes.
Why would you say that?
Because 7 months earlier, the moderate forces were in control of the situation, and when the final pressing on the part of the United States government came, the Sandinistas had the upper hand.
You said this morning in your response to questions from counsel that you had never supported the Sandinistas because you, quote, knew what they were when they came to power. Can you explain that statement?
Well, in other words, I never supported the Sandinistas. I never supported the takeover. At one point in Nicaragua, I was fighting both the Sandinistas and Somoza. Nonetheless, when the Sandinistas took power, I did my best to shore up the revolution, to steer it in a democratic way. I came to this country, I lobbied for a $75 million loan, which would open up the financial world for them. And I continued investing money in businesses in Nicaragua and continued to insist on their fulfilling the commitments that they made to the Organization of American States, to the world, and especially to the Nicaraguan people.
But they apparently didn't fulfill those commitments.
They had their own agenda from way back.
What was that agenda?
The agenda was the one dictated by the Soviet Union through their Cuban proxies.
Can you talk for a moment about the process by which what appeared to be a fairly broad-based coalition behind the revolution in 1979 came to be captured, if you will, by the comandantes now in control of the FSLN?
Well, they had the weapons. We were just on the political side of the situation, and that they fooled the people. They told the people that they were not communists, and there were a lot of useful fools that helped the Sandinistas come to power. And then with the Sandinistas in holding all the armed opposition, all the weapons, all the troops, then it was very, very easy to shove aside those democratic people that had helped them, and that's exactly what they did.
Okay. So in effect, they stole the revolution.
They stole a revolution from the Nicaraguan people, a beautiful opportunity to set Nicaragua off on the path to democracy.
Is there any doubt in your mind that they are in fact communist, Marxist-Leninist?
Well, they were from before. They are by their own admittance. They say that there can be no revolution without Marxist-Leninism, and they are intent on spreading this revolution through Central America. As a matter of fact, I have said that the only force that has held the Sandinistas at bay inside Nicaragua and not permitted the revolution without border, which they announced, has been the democratic freedom fighters, the Nicaraguan resistance.
Now, your forces, your men, are they paid?
No, sir. Some, a very small percentage, are given family support because they had to get their families out of the country. This war has been too long, and every day more and more relatives of our fighting men are coming out, creating more obligations to us. As a matter of fact, there are now close to 500,000 Nicaraguans, refugees through Central America and in the United States. There's more Nicaraguans walking into the United States now and crossing the Rio Grande than Mexicans, maybe.
So about a sixth of the population of Nicaragua is in effect.
Yes, sir. 1/6 of the population has left the country.
Okay. We spent a lot of time on this committee on the question of the Boland Amendment. It sort of goes to the heart of the debate we're engaged in. Can you say a word about the impact that the Boland Amendment had on your operation?
Well, it was quite a blow that we would not only be given, be cut off, support be cut off, but that there be a law that would close any and all possibilities of a covert help by U.S. intelligence agencies.
Do the Sandinistas receive outside support and assistance?
The Sandinistas have received, to our count, about $2.5 billion from the Soviet Union alone, plus what has come from the Eastern Bloc and from Western countries that simply don't know what they're doing, I would say. And over 100,000 tons of materials, of lethal materials, have come to the Sandinistas from the Soviet Union, and we have received a token of that aid, and as far as tonnage is concerned, about 5% probably, or maybe between 5 and 10% of the tonnage in weapons that the Sandinistas have received.
I asked the Defense Intelligence Agency for numbers. They indicated that from the Soviet Union and Cuba and the Eastern Bloc, 83 through 86, over $3.14 billion in economic and military assistance specifically during that period of time. The Boland Amendment, in effect, denied you any further public support or official support from the United States government. That have a significant impact on the morale of your troops?
Yes, it was quite a blow, but our men swore to keep on fighting, and we did keep on fighting, and we did get this outside support, and that kept us alive, that kept our effort going.
What would have happened to your operation if there had not been funds made available, either through third countries or private sources? What if in fact, the cutoff envisioned by the Boland Amendment had been complete?
There would have been a tremendous bloodshed. Our men would have been annihilated. The Sandinistas would have consolidated their power in Nicaragua, and they would by now have expanded into the rest of the Central American countries.
Would it be fair to say that that period of time the Boland Amendment was in effect gave the Sandinistas breathing space in Nicaragua?
I would say that any policy that does not aid, on the part of the United States, that does not aid or that prevents aid to go to the resistance is something that the Sandinistas take advantage of, and is something that they relish and they use as a propaganda tools in Nicaragua and in the rest of the world.
Why do you suppose the Soviets are so heavily involved? I mean, they've given literally billions of dollars to support the establishment of a communist regime in Managua.
Well, a Pacific facility for the Soviets in Nicaragua would constitute the only port in the Pacific for the Soviets, besides Cam Ranh Bay and Vladivostok in the Soviet Union. That's very important. Also, it gives them air facilities in another country besides Cuba, and they have built an airstrip in Nicaragua that can take in the biggest Soviet fighters, I mean bombers and airplanes.
Are you aware of any private U.S. efforts or sources of private funding in the United States to the Sandinista government or activities in Nicaragua supported and approved by the Sandinistas?
Yes, there are a number of organizations here in the United States in combination with CISPES, which is...
CISPES, the
CISPES,
Committee
yes.
in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador?
With the communist guerrillas in El Salvador, yes, that do aid Nicaragua, the Sandinista government, that is, and there's over 1,000 Americans in Nicaragua continually supporting the Sandinistas in many ways, and church organizations and other private organizations. The old members of the Lincoln Brigade in Spain also have helped the Sandinistas.
So in other words, there are a large number of American private citizens or organizations providing assistance to, in effect, one side of the civil war in Nicaragua.
Yes, well, leftist organizations in many respects. The Christic Institute, which I understand has very close ties with the Nicaraguan embassy here in Washington, and many others.
You familiar with an organization called Quest for Peace?
No, I'm not sure.
There's an article I'd refer you to that appeared in the Washington Post Sunday, April 19th, that talks about an effort to raise $100 million in the United States to provide, in effect, support for various causes and associated with the existing government of Nicaragua that is on the other side of the conflict that you're engaged in. So I think it's important the records show that private efforts to support the Contras are not the only private activity of American citizens in connection with events in Nicaragua.
Yes, and I think that there's more coming to the Sandinistas than it's coming for us.
You touched upon earlier your general view of Colonel North. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? You had a relationship with him for a long time. He obviously
Yes.
was instrumental in terms of sort of being a plug-in point for you.
Yes, he was the liaison that represented the United States government. I felt vis-a-vis our effort. I have and still have high respect for Colonel North. We had a very respectful relationship, and I felt very sorry when it was suddenly shot.
You think he's been well treated in the commentary you've seen about all of this event?
Sir, I would not. That would involve me in making judgment on a strictly internal situation in this country. But I have high respect, and I should say the other day, at the time of a meeting of a lot of Nicaraguans, there was a group saying that they were going to erect a monument for Colonel North once that Nicaragua was liberated.
So in your opinion, he's an honorable man who dealt always fairly and directly with you?
Yes, sir, definitely.
And do you think he deserves to be punished for his activities?
Well, sir, here again, I would be making judgment, and I want to refrain and leave that to you.
Okay. You also were asked earlier, and I'd like to focus again on this effort, on the extent to which the CIA provided assistance to the FDN during that period of time the Boland Amendment was in effect. Obviously, we're aware that CIA was heavily involved prior to the enactment of the Boland legislation in 1984. But I believe in the deposition, when you were interviewed by committee staff earlier, you talked about the subject. It was mentioned by Senator Cohen, I believe, that you referred to them during that period of time as snoopers rather than helpers. Can you elaborate on that at all? Did they provide any guidance, assistance in terms of your military activities during the time the Boland Amendment was in effect?
No, I would complain. Not only I complained about that and said that we were receiving absolutely no assistance, no help, that there could be ways for them to make some indications to us that would be only logical and within the boundaries of their activity, but no, they were always after information from us.
They were allowed during that period of time, and I think this was an interpretation many of us on the committee certainly supported, they were allowed to collect information. We asked repeatedly for intelligence on what was transpiring in Nicaragua, what was happening in connection with the Civil War. Would it be fair to say that their activities during that period of time were consistent with intelligence gathering as opposed to support for a paramilitary operation?
Oh, definitely. But a time came later on, I could not precise when they got permission to exchange information, which I thought that was fair. And there came a time also that we did get some communications equipment from them in January of 1986 or so, February 1986 probably.
Okay. All right, again, Mr. Calero, I want to thank you for your testimony. Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions.
Thank you very much. Chair recognizes Senator Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Calero, did Colonel North ever tell you that he talked with President Reagan about this matter?
He always told me that the president was back of us, was plugging for us, and that was public, of course. I mean, through President Reagan's Saturday radio talks and in his press conferences, and in every opportunity he had, he did.
Yeah, no, I understand the president's position. My question is, did Colonel North ever tell you that he, Colonel North, had talked with President Reagan about this matter?
Well, about the support of the Nicaraguan...
Yes.
Well, yes, he made some passing references as to the president going to make a speech in our favor or having made a speech in our favor, and to his dedication and to his own serving.
Did he ever say anything other than what you describe as passing references about the president's support for this matter?
To my recollection, yes. I never was privy to any specific or inside information or what the president knew and what the president didn't know.
Yes. My question is, did Colonel North ever tell you that he, Colonel North, said anything to the president?
No, I mean, he did not tell me. I told President something, so and so and so,
right.
so. No, not to my recollection.
Did you ever meet or talk with William Casey, the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, about this matter?
Oh yes, many a time. As a matter of fact, I developed an affection for Mr. Casey. I used to refer to him as Uncle Bill. And I went to his funeral. I expressed my sympathy to his wife and to his daughter. And I felt very touched for what happened to him.
And can you estimate for us on how many occasions you met with Mr. Casey over the past few years?
Oh, maybe about 5 or 6 times. I remember one time that he was in the old executive. That was the last time probably that I saw him. He was in the old executive building, and I realized Colonel North was very much attached to him, and so was I. And I came to visit Colonel North, and Colonel North took me over to visit with Mr. Casey in the old executive office building.
Did all your meetings with Mr. Casey occur in his office, in the executive office building?
In his office in Virginia, 2 or 3, one in the old executive office building, and then I saw him in various socio-political functions, and I did speak to him, yes.
Well, apart from the social political functions, can you tell us approximately when, if you recall, when the meetings occurred, who else was present, and what was said?
I cannot precise dates, but the last time I saw him was maybe in October of 1986, and then I had visited him previously, one time with Mr. Robello in his office, another time with Mr. Bermudez in his office, the time that I referred to in the old executive office building.
Do you remember when the meetings that you attended with Mr. Robello and Mr. Bermudez occurred?
Maybe the one with Mr. Bermudez in 1983, and maybe the one with Mr. Robello in 1984 or sometime 84 or maybe 85. And then the other meetings were occasional.
Can you tell us what was said at those meetings?
We refer to put him up to date on what was going on, and he listened very attentively to everything we said, and in return he showed not disgust, but he felt sorry for the fact that they couldn't do anything for us. And
to your knowledge, was Mr. Casey aware of the assistance you were receiving from Colonel North and from Mr. Secord?
Yes, I told him about our acquisitions of how we were acquiring more weapons and how, and he was hoping that this support would be forthcoming.
When Colonel North asked you for money, you've testified that you gave him $90,000 in traveler's checks.
All told.
All
yes.
told, right.
In about 4, 5, 6, maybe different occasions.
You
yes.
stated the only reason he gave you was to help free the hostages, and then you also, in addition to that, you said, I think your word was, you imagined that he was helping provide funds to other Contra leaders.
Yes, that I should not provide direct because of the sensitivity. They would think that they were dependent on us.
Did you have sole discretion over those funds? Did you have to consult with anybody or get anybody's approval to give Colonel North that money?
No, sir. I had discretion over the funds, and I did not consult with anyone nor told anyone else about it.
Yeah. And those funds were received by you from foreign governments as a result of conversations between American officials and those foreign governments?
Well, I presume that there was, but yeah, they were from I never knew, I couldn't say, I couldn't swear if it was from foreign governments or from foreign people connected with foreign governments or foreign individuals that had no connection.
Just one more question. Did it strike you as strange that a United States government official would be asking you to provide money to help free American hostages in Lebanon?
Well, it was, I did not, you see, the fact that it was for such a worthy cause, a cause that I considered my own, that's all I thought about, and I thought it a great opportunity for Nicaraguans to repay, to compensate, to do something for Americans who were in a position that their own government could not do anything for them on account of laws that I don't know, but
But you had no way of knowing whether the money actually was used for that purpose, did you?
I had no way. I didn't check, and I trusted that whatever Colonel North would use it for was for a worthy cause.
Thank you. I believe my time is up, but thank you, Mr. Calero.
Thank you. Mr. Stokes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colero, how long have you been back in the country this time?
This time, about 2 weeks, I believe, sir.
Okay. And prior to your appearance here today, have you had any discussions with any intelligence community officials or any State Department officials?
No, not. I just informed them that I was to appear here. They knew about it, and but I have not discussed what I am going to say, or what I had to say. No one told me what to say.
Can you tell us who you notified you were going to appear here?
Well, I did not notify, but I told a Central Intelligence officer that I was here and that I would like to see them after I did that today, after the hearing.
I'm trying to ascertain whom it was you talked with.
Well, I understand that I am not to reveal names of persons connected with the United States intelligence agencies.
I mean, someone told you that in your testimony here you're not to mention the names of any...
No, it's just an understanding that I have had, and in the council I was told that to refrain from naming a specific names, and I have read somewhere that it's not convenient to do that, that there is a law inclusive to protect these people who are doing delicate work for this country.
Sir.
To refrain from specifically naming agents of the Central Intelligence Agency. But if you wish, he may put that name on a piece of paper and hand it to you, sir. Do you wish to have that happen?
I would appreciate having it for the record, Mr. Chairman.
Will you put that agent's name on a piece of paper?
The name that he goes by, or
both names,
Well,
all
yeah,
names.
Whatever names he's known by, we appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, perhaps so this won't come out of my 5 minutes, maybe we could have him just do that later.
Please proceed.
Mr. Calero, you can provide that for us anytime later this afternoon.
all right, sir, I will do that.
In your response this morning to Congressman Brooks, you stated that no Americans laid mines in Nicaragua. You referred to these persons saying you thought it was Nicaraguans, that they were operatives. No matter what nationality they were, you knew that they were working for the CIA, did you not?
Well, I had no way of checking on it. I never checked on it, and they could have been working for the agency, and that was in January of 1984.
Well, you had no doubt that the CIA paid for those mines, do you?
No, as I had no doubt that they were paying for the weapons we were getting and all the other things we were getting.
And that they paid for the vessels that laid the mines.
I figured that that was the case. We were receiving U.S. aid at the time.
You don't think Colonel Bermudez had any doubt about who took him on that cruise down the coast of Nicaragua, do you?
Probably not, probably not.
This morning in your testimony, you talked about having no idea where the $32 million in donations from one source came from. This money was virtually the lifeblood of your effort for more than a year.
Yes, sir.
But you asked no one where it came from.
No, sir, it did not interest me. I had an inkling that it came from a Middle Eastern source, and I understood this to be a covert thing, and in many times I don't want to be privy to information that I do not need, and that it is not necessary for me to ask about.
Well, General Secord had said to you, had he not, that he would make efforts to get $15 to $25 million from an Arab sheikh or a prince. Didn't he say that to you?
From a Middle Eastern country, he was going to talk to a prince, sheikh, friend of his.
Well, did you ever ask him where'd the money come from?
No.
Did you ever ask Mr. North?
I don't remember ever asking, no.
So notwithstanding the fact that you really needed money badly and that this was the lifeblood of your operation, you inquired of no one as to where this money came from?
No, sir. What mattered was the fact that we had the money and not who had given it to us.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Senator McClure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Colero, for your testimony today and for your willingness to share with us of your own knowledge of this affair. I understand that it is a sensitive matter and that you're trying to protect your own movement, your own personnel, and those with whom you have had contact, and I understand that some questions you've had to answer have been very difficult for you to answer. Mr. Calero, you testified this morning that the CIA required very simple accounting records for the money that they expended. How would you compare the accounting that they required with the accounting you do yourself internally?
Pretty similar, I would say. Pretty similar.
Good.
Yes.
And you believe your own records are sufficient for you to be able to account for every penny that's been collected and spent?
Yes, sir.
And so you believe that what you were required to do by the CIA would do the same with respect to those monies?
I would say so, yes.
Mr. Colero, we have received testimony before this committee that Colonel North kept a ledger about the expenditure of the monies that were proceeds from the traveler's checks. Do you know of such a ledger?
No, I do not know of such a ledger. No, sir, but I imagine that he kept one.
You didn't question him about his accounting or his expenditures for those funds?
No, sir. I had full confidence in that whatever he did was for the cause.
You had full confidence that he would not misuse the money, and it was money that you had absolute authority over?
Yes, sir.
Let me shift for a moment and ask about conditions that exist in your country today. Is there freedom of the expression of religious preferences in Nicaragua today?
Well, not only there is no freedom of religion in Nicaragua, but there is persecution of religious people in Nicaragua and people who attend churches. About 20 Catholic priests have been thrown out. As many Protestant and ministers from other denominations have been thrown out of the country. And the church authorities, the hierarchical church authorities, are under constant harassment. A good friend of mine who was the head of the Jehovah's Witnesses in Nicaragua was thrown out, and Mormons have been accused of being CIA agents, and there is definite hostility in keeping with the communist thinking that religion is the opium of the people.
How about the Catholic Church press? Is it free and operating today?
There is no Catholic newspapers or leaflets out today. Their press was confiscated. The Catholic radio station was shut down. The Jewish temple was desecrated.
Has the Bishop of Managua written letters, open letters to the public or to people in this country with respect to the oppression of religious activities in Managua?
Yes, sir. There was even a letter that he wrote some time ago, published translated into English and published in the Washington Post. And occasional homilies are published outside of the country.
One of the great newspapers of Latin America and perhaps of the free world existed in your country, La Prensa.
La Prensa.
Is
yes,
La Prensa today a free and open newspaper?
La Prensa is not a newspaper anymore. La Prensa has been shut down, and in the last effort that they made to put out a leaflet or a flyer at the time of the parliamentary meeting in Nicaragua, the secret police came to La Prensa and confiscated every piece of paper they had, and they were threatened not to put out any more information in any regard.
How about the observance of human rights on an individual basis?
The Sandinistas are systematic breakers of human rights. There is no habeas corpus in Nicaragua. People are not brought over to tribunals. They kept in jail the time the Sandinistas won. There's secret jails. Their secret jails are spread throughout the country. There is torture going on. While I was still living in Nicaragua, I was personally told of experiences of one of my driver salesmen of the Coca-Cola, I remember, was put into a freezer, and when he was about to die and started to I don't know what you call that, the last reaction that people have when they are to die, somebody heard him and took him out, and that's how he came out alive.
Mr. Calero, it's no surprise to me that people within your country would fight to try to gain individual freedoms as we know them in this country. What really surprises me is the people in this country are blind to the oppression in your country and somehow find you the wrongdoer in a struggle for freedom.
Well, I think if they apply that principle that do unto others what you want done unto you, would set a lot of people straight. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people in this country and in many, many other countries who are ready to give Nicaraguans what they would never have for themselves.
Mr. Calero, my time is up. Thank you very much for your response to the questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hatch.
Confirm what you told the committee this morning. I personally communicated with you in February of this year, and I know that you made all of your accounting records available to the committee at that time. The fact that the committee has chosen not to look at your records should not detract from your complete cooperation with this committee, so I appreciate what you've done. Now, you testified that you met with the President on 3 or 4 occasions, beginning in April 1985. In your meeting with the President, was there any mention that the President knew anything of Colonel North's activities?
No, sir.
Were these meetings general courtesy visits, handshaking kinds of events with no real detailed discussion taking place, or were they detailed discussion meetings?
I would say they were protocolary, they were very symbolic. The President of the United States wanted to show his full backing of our effort, and I believe that was achieved. And at the time of a vote, an unfavorable vote to us, the President had us called in at the last minute, and there was a reiteration of his position. And I remember at one time when he said that he will never abandon us, I yelled, "Viva Reagan!"
That's good. So I take it you are not in a position to tell us what the President knew or didn't know about the details of what other people may have been doing to support your cause. Is that correct?
No, sir. I am in no position to say that.
Now, you indicated in your testimony that you had basically nothing to do with the South, the battles in the South. Is that right?
Yes, very, very, very little, very little.
Okay, so then it wasn't necessarily uncommon for Colonel North to fill you in on all of the details concerning the Southern Front airlift operation that began in 1986. Is that correct?
Yes, he told me somewhat about him, but since my connection with the South was very scant, I would say, it was not necessary for him to fill me in on details on that.
All right. Now, there has been mention made here of your giving traveler's checks to Colonel North on several occasions. And I take it from your answers given to Senator Cohen this morning that you voluntarily gave those checks to Colonel North.
Yes, sir, I did.
Did you have any thought at all that Colonel North might misuse those checks in any manner, such as converting them to his own private use?
No, to this day, I do not have.
Okay, do you feel that Colonel North would have used any of that money for his personal use from your experience with Colonel North?
No.
Okay, now, Mr. Colero, you and the rest of the Nicaraguan resistance have, in my view, been caught in the middle of this public inquiry of ours. In my opinion, you have become the quintessential victims, and I think this is a very unfortunate result of all this. You're fighting a war, and I suspect that the last thing you need is a spotlight on your activities while we perform this public self-examination. But just to make sure that the record is straight, Mr. Colero, did you or any representative of yours ever ask for money from the sales of arms to Iran?
No, sir.
Okay. Did you ever ask or even recommend that the U.S. government approach any foreign government for funding?
No, sir, but after it became public about the Brunei donation, which I still hope we will get because we are very heavily in debt right now. We owe $1,900,000. I knew that the U.S. government officers were authorized to solicit funds to help us.
All right. You were happy to receive funds from any source, weren't you?
Yes, sir.
Because you were fighting a battle and you wanted to do what you could do.
Yes, sir.
But you didn't pressure, did you pressure any U.S. government officials to break any laws or to do anything improper in order to get funds to you?
No, sir, I would never do that.
Okay. In fact, I suspect that this controversy has been quite an unwelcome intrusion into your affairs. Isn't that right?
Totally, sir, and it has taken a lot of time, a lot of effort, and put us in a situation where very uncomfortable and that we wish we were not.
All right. Now, your efforts to restore democratic government to your country are ongoing. Is that correct?
Definitely, and we will keep them going.
Now, despite all of the aggravation, are you still desperately in need of American support in order to continue your
Yes,
efforts?
sir. We need American support. We want American support. You are our allies, and whenever I think of that, I think of Churchill when he said that democracy was not the best form of government, but show me a better one. That's the way I feel.
Well, that's right. Just one final question, Mr. Colero. What, in your judgment, as a leader of the freedom fighters down there, as a leader of the resistance forces, will happen if the Soviets are allowed to continue to dominate the government of Nicaragua the way they have in the past?
Well, that government will consolidate as communist governments do. They will need to expand in order to keep alive, and Central America will become a Soviet-dominated area, and from there they will naturally expand into other areas. Like the Duchy of Muscovy has extended every 30 years by territory the size of Alaska since 1600.
Well, I want to thank you for the cooperation you've given to my staff members, to this whole committee, and for the efforts that you're making. I believe in what you're doing, and I just want to commend you for your efforts and your candor in working with us.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Sarbanes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Calero, you spoke earlier of your meetings with the President. I take it, was Colonel North present at all of those meetings?
Yes, if I remember correctly, except the time that I was with the President on 2 occasions in these socio-political functions.
And did those meetings with the President take place in the Oval Office?
One of them in the Oval Office, another one in the Roosevelt Room, another one in Mr. McFarland's office.
I take it throughout you felt that Colonel North was acting pursuant to the intentions of the President. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, when you met, you also said you met with the Vice President, and in response to Senator Mitchell, you indicated you'd met a number of times with the Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, Mr. Casey, or as you referred to him, Uncle Bill.
Yes, sir.
And earlier, I think you testified to many, many meetings with Colonel North.
Yes, sir.
Who else in the government, in the United States government, were you meeting with?
Well, the officers of the Central Intelligence that were detached in Central America, and I visited with many congressmen and congressional committee, well, and Senate, of course, committees, and well, the U.S. ambassador down in Central America, or U.S. ambassadors down in Central America, whenever I visited any of the country, and staffers in Congress, and I have gotten to know a lot of people.
What about
in this.
officials in the State Department and in the
Oh, yes,
Department of Defense?
Yeah, State Department, yes.
Who did you meet there?
Well, there have been changes with Mr. Enders and with Mr. I don't remember the name of the one who came after Mr. Enders, but Mr. Motley, Mr. Abrams, Mr. Schultz, and deputy assistants to Mr. Abrams and Mr. Schultz. And,
Did you have a great number of meetings with these officials? Mr. Abrams, for example?
Not a great number of meetings, no.
How many meetings would you say you had?
With Mr. Abrams, maybe half a dozen or so.
Were you the representative of your forces for the purpose of meeting with U.S. government officials, or were other leaders doing so as well?
Well, we had the Nicaraguan Unified Opposition was composed of various organizations, and I did meet with some, and my associates met with others. Sometimes we all three met with the same person.
But were you satisfied that there weren't meetings going on behind your back?
Well, I believe that in freedom, I believe that meetings can go on in front of me, behind my back, or on my side, for that matter.
All right. Did you perceive General Secord to be a part of Colonel North's operations?
I perceive General Secord to be close to Colonel North, yes.
And that they were working together as a team?
Well, that would be venturing more than I know, but I perceive that there was closeness between the two, yes.
Right. Now, I want to ask you about the memorandum that you sent to Ambassador Dumling. I think it's exhibit number 5 that you have there.
Mm-hmm.
I know this has been touched on, but I want to be very clear. How did this letter come to be written and signed by you and your two colleagues?
Well, at the request of the interested party, which in this case was Mr. Robert Owen, who wanted to continue to work in this endeavor, and but who needed something to live from, and we thought that with his knowledge of both the southern operation, the northern operation, the eastern operation, the Indians, for his dedication and with his knowledge of Capitol Hill, he had been a staffer, and his knowledge of a lot of other people, that he would make a good liaison and could help us expedite matters and explain matters to the people in the Nicaraguan Humanitarian Assistance Office.
Well, was it your idea or was it Owen's idea that he should be placed there?
If I remember correctly, it was at his request, and I thought it was, but since I signed the letter, I agreed that it could help.
And did you understand that Colonel North thought it was a good idea, too, that Owen be placed in that office?
Well, I would say that I did not get a request as such from Colonel North that I would remember, but I imagine that it would please Colonel North, since I knew of an association between Colonel North and Mr. Owen.
So when Owen requested it, you assumed that North wanted it as well, is that correct?
Well, I would say that it was enough for me to write it, but I didn't write the letter, he wrote it, but it was enough for me to know that Owen was interested in this, for me to help him obtain that position.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Rudman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colero, I also want to thank you for your cooperation with the committee. You're very forthcoming, giving us access to records that have made our investigation easier, enabled us to bring this to the attention of the American people in full detail, and we thank you for that. Mr. Colero, you had a difficult time over the last few years keeping enough money in your coffers to keep your fight going on. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
As a matter of fact, it's been a never-ending battle with on-again, off-again U.S. funding, foreign funding, funding from private friends in this country and around the world. It's been a tough battle to keep your account from being below zero. Is that not correct?
Yes, sir.
And as a matter of fact, you shopped rather carefully for everything you bought.
I did my best, yes, sir.
As a matter of fact, you bought a lot of weapons from Energy Resources, as that shows on the chart.
Yes, sir.
Sometime after that, you bought some weapons through General Singlaub, and you bought them at what you consider a much better price.
Yes, sir.
Is it not true that, and it may have been totally coincidental, but looking at those records, that at the time that you bought those weapons from General Singlaub and no longer from Energy Resources, at that point, you received no more direct transfer of funds from Lake Resources into your account? Is that not true?
Well, not from Lake Resources, because I had not received before, but from other accounts, yes. Yes, that is true. It was coincidental or whatever, but I did not receive any more, yes.
But based on testimony that I'm sure you're familiar with, the amount of money that flowed from the Iranian arms sale, it must kind of break your heart to think of all of that money tied up in a Swiss bank account that theoretically somebody had schemed up was for you. Isn't that true?
Well, I still have hope that it might be coming.
Well, there are a lot of people claiming that $8 million, Mr. Colero. You better put your claim right in line. Ms. Colero, matter of fact, based on our examination of your records, you handled this money in a very professional way. It was almost like a trust, wasn't it, the way you looked at it? Your bank account?
Yes, sir. For me, it was sort of sacred, and I've said publicly that I challenge anyone to do what we did over that period of time with that amount of money.
As a matter of fact, charges made against you and your brother and others that you used this money for your personal use are false, are they not?
Definitely, sir.
And no one could prove that you used money for yourself. Is that not true?
Definitely, sir.
As a matter of fact, you did not intend any of this money to be used for anybody's personal use, including yours. Is that not correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, you gave Colonel North $90,000 in traveler's checks.
Yes, sir.
They were blank at both ends, which is rather unusual, which made them fully negotiable. Is that correct?
The bank did us that favor.
You've got a very friendly bank, Mr. Colero. Yes. At any rate, some of those checks were used for DEA agents, which we have advised you about, and some were used for other purposes, such as helping other Contra leaders. We don't know what a lot of it was used for. As a matter of fact, those charts don't really prove anything other than those checks appear to be cashed at retail establishments by a signatory that says Oliver North. We don't know whether that is Oliver North's signature. We believe it is.
Yes, sir.
But certainly there was never any intention on your part that any of your hard-earned funds were to be used for anybody's personal use other than for the cause. Is that not correct?
Yes, sir.
And looking at the last item of the first column on the right-hand sheet, National Tire Wholesalers, there were 2 snow tires purchased with that. When was the last time it snowed in Nicaragua?
Well, sir, it does not snow in Nicaragua.
I didn't think so.
However, I'm sure there is an explanation for that, and Colonel North...
I hope there is, Mr. Calero, because this committee draws no inferences to guilt or innocence. All we know is that we went to a lot of trouble to trace $90,000 worth of checks, and we were as surprised as you are to see those. Colonel North, of course, we hope will get here, probably under immunity, and he can explain himself, and I hope he can, because this is not a trial.
Yes, sir.
We're not trying to assess guilt or innocence. We're trying to find out what happened.
Yes, sir.
But you would agree with me that you never intended any of your hard-worked-for money to be used for anyone's personal use, including your own.
No, sir.
I thank you very much, and thank you again for your help with the committee. You've been a great help, and also You've been an articulate spokesman for what you believe in, and I think it's important the American people had a chance to hear what you had to say.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Boren.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colero, as I understand it, long before the fall of the Somoza regime, you were already expressing your belief in certain democratic principles, and I believe, if I'm correct, that you suffered imprisonment and other harassment during that regime. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then after the revolution, you attempted to stay and be a constructive part of the new Sandinista regime, and I believe, in fact, the leaders of that regime in the beginning commended you as the kind of business leader that was staying on and making investments.
Yes, they used me as an example, yes.
Then what happened to you after you left? I believe you came to the United States for a brief visit late in 1982. What happened while you were on that visit to members of your family?
Well, I was already thinking as to where my resourcefulness could be of better use for democracy in Nicaragua, either outside or in Nicaragua. And while I was debating to come back, the Sandinistas looted my house, threw some relatives that were staying in it, threw them out of the house, and that decided me never to come back until we could live in democracy.
You were operating in good faith, and they confiscated your home, in essence, while you were gone.
Yes, sir.
I think many members of the American public don't realize that this regime, which has portrayed itself as a friend of the average man and woman, has seized homes and large homes in the capital city, and now occupying them all themselves as a privileged group now ruling the country. Isn't that correct?
Yes, mine was a modest home, but
let me ask, this morning you testified that you were unaware that Mr. Secord was charging commissions, that until he testified before this committee, that commissions of somewhere in the range, he said in his testimony to us, of between 20 and 30% markups were being added on to the items that were being sold to you. I understand you this morning to say that you had no knowledge of that until the time of that testimony.
Yes, sir.
Did that surprise you?
Well, as I say, I think I said it was revealing. It was a revelation.
How had, in conversations previously, had General Secord led you to believe that this was an operation to be of help, solely of help to the movement, as opposed to a profit-making proposition?
Yes, I understood it to be that way, yes.
What caused you to understand that? What kind of expression did he use to you in that regard?
Well, that in the first shipment, that the first airlift, the detail that I got included hotel bills and airfares and other things, and that, well, I mean, usually one who has a profit does not make such details, you know.
So in other words, all the personal costs were being charged.
Yes.
And you felt because of that they weren't trying to add a markup to pay themselves a salary or pay their expenses on top of that.
Yes, and I believe if I remember correctly, I believe I was told that he was not making profit. Yes.
Did you, Senator Redmond mentioned that it might be pure coincidence that when you decided to start buying weapons from through General Singlab, and instead of through the Secord enterprise, through that particular arms transfer enterprise, that your authority to have cash directly sent to you to make those purchases in the future was taken away. The cash flow was transferred to other persons, and you after that were simply receiving supplies. Do you have any theories yourself, or have you come to any thoughts in your own mind, or do you harbor any suspicions as to why that change of policy was made, or did anyone indeed ever give you a good reason as to why the change was made?
Well, no, I was never given a good reason, and and I understand that there was no money coming into the project to me or to anyone else all during 1985, except what the $1,045,000 that we got from Intel Corporation and the $200,000 from the lake resources until the other thing developed, later in February, I understand that has been said, of 1986.
Thank you very much, Mr. Calero. Thank you,
Yes,
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. We have been referring to this chart in the back of us, Mr. Colero. Is that chart correct?
Yes, it is within the reality of the situation. Of course, that has been taken out strictly from the bank records that I submitted.
According to that chart, you had under your control $33,814,000. And much of it came from sources that were either solicited by high-ranking American officials or voluntarily provided by United States citizens. Isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
What does this $417,000 represent?
That $417,000, I did explain yesterday that in part represented monies that were transferred to account of ours, and we turned over from UNO, the Unified Nicaraguan Opposition, and that were turned over to our radio station, which was being ran by UNO, and for other endeavors that were not necessarily FDN, because FDN did not participate in that money from UNO on account of its military connotation. But I have not seen the details of the 417, and so I would not be able to comment fully on it unless I saw the details made up by the accountants.
How many Nicaraguans have fled the country?
I understand it's in the vicinity of 500,000 Nicaraguans out of a population of 3 million. So really, it's a lot higher than 6 or so percent that has been mentioned. It's closer to 15% of the population.
Would I be correct in assuming that most, if not all, of the very wealthy millionaire families of Nicaragua have fled Nicaragua?
No, sir. It's really, ironically, it's the other way around. The biggest and wealthiest families are still in Nicaragua, and the immense majority of the people who have left Nicaragua are professionals and small, medium-sized landowners, skilled workers, and plain ordinary people, farming people, peasants that you would never imagine would have reason for living, but have had reason for living.
Have you been successful in raising funds for Nicaraguans who have fled the country?
No, sir. It seems that the immense majority of Nicaraguans that have left have difficult situations, even though some of them were at one time wealthy themselves. But we have received contributions for different types of things. We have to take care of refugees also in some of the countries, and most of the Nicaraguan efforts have been directed to relieving the necessities of refugees.
You have been in this country on many, many occasions. I believe you testified that you've met with Colonel North over 50 times and the President 3-4 times, and with high officials of the State Department, etc. On each occasion, did you arrive here at the invitation of United States officials?
No, sir. As a matter of fact, I came here on my own the immense majority of the times. And,
you mean you can come here and knock on a door and see the President if you wanted to?
No, I have never done that. I was told that the President was ready to see us, so I came especially for that occasion. And
whenever you saw Colonel North, was it at his invitation?
No, I would call him and tell him that I was here or that I was coming here, and then we would set up a date, yes, an appointment.
The $90,000 worth of traveler's checks, which you said you voluntarily gave because this was an opportunity for Nicaraguans to support the United States, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
But you didn't raise any money from Nicaraguans. This was money that was raised by Americans, given back to Americans.
No, no, sir. That was money. That money was coming from foreign sources at the time.
Which was solicited by Americans.
Well, could have been, yes.
Now, didn't Mr. North request the $90,000?
Well, the way he explained to me the necessity, I considered an invitation for me to make a decision, and my decision was to give this money for a cause which I consider to be one and the same with our cause, and I felt deeply for what was happening to these poor people that had been kidnapped.
According to the testimony we have received to date, about 99% of the funds you have received, about all of the equipment you have received, supplies, etc., have come through the United States. Would that be correct?
The equipment that we have received have come through the United States?
Or paid for by funds raised by American officials?
Or solicited or whatever?
That's right.
Well, I have not made such I haven't figured it out that way the way you have.
Would you say no to Colonel North?
Would I say no to Colonel North?
No, if Colonel North requested you to do something, would you say no?
Well, if he requested something that I was not in agreement with, yes, as I would tell anyone.
If Colonel North told you not to buy from General Secord, would you buy from General Secord?
Well, he would have to have a good reason to tell me not to buy from General Secord or whoever. I would listen to him and consider his opinion, yes, as I would anybody within my organization. Or
have you ever said no to Colonel North or Mr. Casey?
Well, I don't remember that they ever proposed to me anything with which I would be in disagreement or which I consider offensive or immoral.
Would I be correct in saying that your effort in Nicaragua was guided and directed by high officials of the government of the United States?
You would not be correct in saying that.
High officials did not participate in training or in operational strategy?
No, that has been, as of recent times, they have been more involved, but I would say that we do need the help from this country. We have never hidden that fact. We have said it openly. However, we Nicaraguans are the ones running our struggle. We want to continue to run it, and we want to be independent, or at least interdependent.
A question was asked, did you request funds raised in the sale of arms to Iran? And you said no.
No, yes.
That's absolutely no.
Absolutely no, yeah. I didn't even know about the sale of arms to Iran.
Were you aware that sales were being made?
No, sir, I wasn't. It was a surprise to me when I saw it on television.
Therefore, naturally, you didn't make this request.
I couldn't have if I didn't know there was anything forthcoming.
We're aware of where all the funds came from?
Of all the funds came from, aside from a suspicion that it was from the aside from knowing that it was from the Middle East, and then from public accounts I saw identifying a certain country with them, I did not know.
You have responded that You just assume that Colonel North was acting under the direction of the President of the United States. Is that correct?
Well, yes, I imagine that people that work in the White House are acting under the general guidance of the President of the United States.
Would you say the same for Admiral Poindexter?
I have met Admiral Poindexter and exchanged very few words with him, but I would imagine that's the way things are done in this country. Huh?
Would you say the same for Assistant Secretary Abrams?
I would imagine that he has his Secretary of State, and then Secretary of State is under the President, yes.
The answer would be the same for any American ambassador?
I imagine.
Did you at any time doubt that Colonel North's direction to you did not meet the approval of the government of the United States?
No, I would say that he was, I didn't see any reason why I believe that he was acting outside of the law. Although he mentioned maybe in just, he was out on a limb. I mean, he would, maybe to emphasize his dedication and his effort and his hard work and his dedication, as I said, to our cause.
I realize I've exceeded my 5 minutes, but we're still waiting for the House. If you have further questions, I'd be very happy to yield. As you know, the House is now in a process of having 5 votes in a row.
Mr. Chairman, could I just ask if he would expand on the last remark? Did you say that Colonel North said to you that he was out on a limb?
Yeah, he would go out on a limb, something like that. He made some kind of an expression like that, out on the edge, out on the limb. I mean, I cannot recall it exactly, but...
What did you take him to mean by that? What did you understand by that?
Well, that he was so dedicated, that he could, in his enthusiasm, he had to be very careful or something like that, or emphasize on his work, on his hard work, which I know was for a fact. I mean, I called him in his office at times, and he was very, very late all the time working.
Yes.
Please, Senator Cohen. Mr. Calero, did you meet with David Walker, British?
I remember meeting a British man, and I have read accounts and heard of accounts, so it could have been the same fellow that I met, yes.
And what sort of discussions did you have with him?
It was about intelligence of a trip that one of his associates had taken to Nicaragua, and the fact that it was very difficult to the access to those helicopters on the ground was a difficult thing, and it didn't go beyond that.
Did you discuss with him the possibility of hiring him or employing his services to destroy those Hind helicopters while they were on the ground?
Well, that was the idea of his taking a trip there, to see what possibilities there were in making such an effort.
And you weren't able to reach any accommodation or agreement?
No, at all. We didn't even discuss the situation any further because it was something considered to be extremely difficult.
Difficult to destroy them on the ground?
Yeah, difficult to carry out the operation on account of the Sandinista surveillance
You indicated a few moments ago that you were on the Hill from time to time, Capitol Hill, making visits to various congressmen and senators, I assume indicating how much you needed support from the Congress.
Yes, sir.
Did you indicate to them that you were in desperate need of funds?
Yes, I opened up to them, answered all their questions in the best way I could, and requested their support.
Did you ever indicate to any of the members of Congress that you had, in fact, been stockpiling weapons and ammunition, and you had enough to last for some considerable period of time?
Well, we only had the big stockpile in
85.
Very few items, though. We had a big stockpile in ammunition and rifles. But everything else we were short of, practically, yes.
I was wondering, because that memo that I referred to earlier this morning, the final paragraph said, please do not in any way make anyone aware of the deposit. I assume that's referring to the deposit from country number 2. The deposit. There's only one the deposit, right? Please do not make anyone aware of the deposit. Too much is becoming known by too many people. We need to make sure that this new financing does not become known. The Congress must believe that there continues to be urgent need for funding. Did Colonel North ever tell you that?
That's the one. No, I don't remember that, and that's the letter that I don't remember receiving. You know, and being acquainted with. But we never stocked. The only thing we could have considered to stockpile is 10,000 rifles and 15 million rounds of ammunition. Everything else we had in limited amounts. And at the time, my interest was in obtaining surface-to-air missiles, because the Sandinistas, the Hind D helicopters, the Soviet, the flying tanks, you know, that really turned the situation in the war, appeared until August 1985.
Were you aware, well, you solicited, you attempted to solicit money from country number 3, all right? I think you indicated.
Yes.
And you were unsuccessful in that attempt.
I was unsuccessful, yes.
Were you ever made aware that that country was in fact solicited and they contributed $2 million?
No, I found that out yesterday, and but I knew, however, that my friend General Singlaub had spoken to some people there and in other places too, trying to get money, and I was surprised to hear, and he's surprised too.
Well, are you surprised to learn now that the $2 million apparently never came to you?
Well, I'm certainly surprised now, and I will look for them.
Thank you very much.
On April 9th, 1987, you met with the staff of this committee, and under oath you testified as follows. On a question as to whether Colonel North had asked you for money, you said yes. And the question followed, did he tell you what it was for? And you answered, something connected with hostages. Question, what did he say, Colonel North, what did he say? Answer, that was going to be used in connection with the hostages because the United States government could not, you know, couldn't do anything like that. Was he talking about the hostages that were taken in Lebanon? Yes, those hostages, yes.
Well, that's what I have repeated and expanded a little bit today.
He told you that the United States government could not do it, so you do it for us?
Well, I mean, the United States government, that's what there was some limitations as to what, of course, I mean, I am talking about something that happened 3 years ago, and I'm trying to put together thoughts in my own words, and that's...
Thank you very much. Senator McClure.
Mr. Chairman, I have one further question.
And then,
I ran out of time. Mr. Colero, you testified this morning that you did get some intelligence information from Colonel North, I think some maps and photographs. If I recall correctly, you also said it wasn't very useful to you, or you didn't use it. Am I correct?
No, I said that from none of the intelligence that we got at different times or from Colonel North, we used or we based any plan of ours or any battle or any, yes, that I have said. And I remember, yes, seeing maps with indications there, radar stations or anti-aircraft stations or things like that.
But it didn't affect your operations or wasn't useful to you in planning day-to-day operations?
No, never. We never got any intelligence that would be useful to plan day-to-day or to plan, or even to plan an operation ahead. No. We had our own intelligence too. We have lots of messengers inside Nicaragua. And inside Nicaragua, we have a network of people working for us. The fact is that no guerrilla can subsist without the cooperation of the civilian population.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Heflin.
I referred my questioning to a document, I believe, pertaining to $98,000 in traveler's checks that were made payable to, given to Colonel North, and this was an analysis of the disbursements of that had been able to be identified. It's my understanding that 3 checks on this analysis involve checks to people involved with the DEA on hostages that they totaled $25,300. For the record, unless there is some reason that I don't know about, I would like to make this a part of the record. Is there a reason?
Yeah, I see that.
I would have to set this aside temporarily because there are certain names appearing on this that should not appear in the open record.
Well, I wasn't certain, to be sure. That's all.
Congressman Hyde.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colero, it's true, is it not, that the Sandinistas took 18 years to ultimately be there when Somoza was toppled. Is that not true?
Yes, sir. That's right.
And during that 18 years, they had the support of the communist bloc nations, did they not?
Yes, sir.
You've only been at this since about 82, is that correct?
82, 83, yes.
Now, we often hear, Mr. Colero, that the Contras can't win, that they don't have the equipment, the training to march into Managua, to win any big battles, to occupy any cities. It's true, is it not, that the Contras are not a normal military force, but they're a guerrilla force. And a guerrilla war is a lot different than a conventional march behind the flags type of war. Is that not so?
Right, sir.
In fact, let me read to you a part of a quotation that I read to General Secord, and he agreed with it. At heart of the upcoming debate lies the victory issue. Can the Nicaraguan democratic resistance win? But the way the question is posed usually obscures the proper response. Victory in a low-intensity war does not signify that the adversary has been militarily defeated. It is confirmation that he is exhausted and bled dry, that he is psychologically defeated. The aim of a guerrilla war is to slowly, through single small actions culminating in larger operations, erode the domestic and international perception of a government's legitimacy. Victory comes unnoticed through the back door in an unexpected moment when a regime collapses like a punctured balloon. Isn't that the purpose and the end of the democratic resistance military operations inside Nicaragua?
That thoroughly coincides with our overall strategy. Yes, sir.
Now, we hear about negotiation. We have a feeling that the problems with communist governments are simply negotiable misunderstandings. And if we could just sit down like good fellows across the table, have a little camaraderie, a little small talk, there's nothing we can't work out with communists. That seems to be a perception that animates so much of the thinking in the West. Isn't it true that we made a deal with the Sandinista Marxist-Leninists back in 1979 when they said to the OAS, we will have free elections, we will have a mixed economy, there will be freedom of the press, freedom of religion, and in exchange for that commitment, why the Organization of American States, the United States, and all of the civilized countries in the area withdrew support from Somoza, and the Sandinistas and their junta was ushered into power. Isn't that true?
Right, sir.
Well, what reason do you have, or can you offer, I can't think of any, that we'd have a different go-around this time if we just sit down and negotiate with the same people that told us what their pledges and promises were in '79? What has happened to make them change those ultimate goals? Can you think of anything?
Well, they have not definitely changed. However, I feel that we are not like them, that we are spiritually and morally of a higher, much higher level, and that we should be open to consider changes of mind which would necessarily come out of a deteriorating condition of the Sandinista government in order maybe to save their necks and go and enjoy all the money they've taken out of the country already.
I come from Chicago, and there are a lot of exiles there, emigres from captive nations, Lithuanians, Poles, Ukrainians, Latvians, Estonians, Czechs, and they know a little bit about dealing with communists and trying to get them to the table to negotiate on human rights and things. And there's some conventional wisdom among these people. It says the way you negotiate with a communist is you grab him by the shirt and the pants and you pull him, and his heart and mind will follow. Do you think there's some wisdom? Do you think they're right? Do you think they've got something there?
Well, there's a lot of experience on the part of those people, I'm sure, that we do not as yet have.
Do you think if we ever reach utopia and the United States develops a consistent policy of supporting the freedom fighters in Nicaragua, and the surrounding states understand that we're there for the long haul of it, we don't have shortness of breath, we're not going to change our mind tomorrow or next week or next session of Congress, that we are committed to the cause of freedom every bit as much as the Soviet Union and Cuba are committed to the revolution without borders. If that conviction could ever permeate Central America, don't you think the frontline states would take heart? Don't you think that they would then stand up with us and with you, and then the Organization of American States would do what it really should do, and that is defend freedom down there. And when Western Europe understood that this is our hemisphere, and that if we have to divert resources from there over here, they may be the weaker, so we would have political pressure, we would have economic pressure, always with the military pressure of the democratic freedom fighters. That combination, that triad, might well bring the Sandinistas to the table, and either the first boat to Havana or negotiate free elections, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, free labor unions, all of those things that spell human dignity, which are absent from Nicaragua today. Don't you think that might happen?
You have expressed it very well, and I subscribe to what you say, sir.
Thank you, and I congratulate you as a great patriot.
Thank you.
Senator Sobbings.
Mr. Colero, was it clear to you in your meetings with President Reagan, at which Colonel North was present, that the President knew Colonel North?
That the President knew him personally?
Yes.
Oh, yes. In the first meeting, Colonel North stayed in Mr. McFarland's office, stayed in the back. He did not participate in the conversation, but he was there. Yes.
But you understood the President knew Colonel North, didn't he?
Oh, I would imagine so, yes. I mean, I don't doubt that.
Yeah. Did Colonel North represent to you on occasions that he had talked with the President about your activities and what was going on?
Well, that he kept the President informed, you mean? Well, I mean, maybe once, twice, or something like that, or more times. Very few times the Colonel North made direct references to the President.
about his conversations with the President about your activities.
And about the President's dedication, about the President's unswerving support to our cause.
Congressman Colero.